I've had a fucking shit day.
Welcome, everyone. Today, we are hosting a debate to see if atheism is dead. With me today, I have Tareyak on the affirmative and Myta on the negative. And the prompt is atheism is dead. So, the way we're going to go ahead and do this is we will have 5-minute opening statements, and then We'll just go straight to cross and then open discussion. And then we'll do closings. So we will start with Tareyak. Go ahead.
Cool beans, honorable judge, respected opponent, and fellow citizens. I stand before you today to declare that atheism is not a bold new truth, but an ancient error whose time has finally passed. In Plato's Laws, he warned that denying the gods is a dangerous disease of the soul. Today, that warning is more relevant than ever. The atheist claims everything arises from blind chance and soulless matter. The gods are mere inventions of poets and priests. Hence why I'm doing this poetically. There is no divine mind, no providence, no ultimate justice. Yet this view collapses under reason's light. How can lifeless matter produce the exquisite order we see in the cosmos? Precise revolutions of the planets, the harmony of nature, the rational structure of reality itself. Order does not emerge from chaos without intelligence. The very existence of the soul, which moves and knows, proves that mind is prior to the body. The universe bears the signature of a divine craftsman. Even more troubling, atheism destroys morality. If there are no gods who care about justice, why should the strong not oppress the weak? Why restrain greed or cruelty when no final reckoning awaits? A godless society inevitably breeds lawlessness and tyranny. My opponent may point to the rise of modern atheism and declare God is dead. And we might actually get into that Nietzsche quote. Nietzsche was not an atheist. But I reply, atheism is dead. Its intellectual foundations have crumbled. Every time an atheist appeals to reason, justice, or the beauty of the universe, they unknowingly borrow from the divine order they reject. Their philosophy is passing delusion, sustained only by youthful arrogance or willful ignorance. True wisdom recognizes what the heavens themselves proclaim. Gods exist, they govern with justice, and the denial of them is no longer intellectually respectable. It is a relic, an empty shell of a thought that cannot support a flourishing life or a stable society. Let the atheist prove the soul comes after the body, or that perfect order arises without mind. Until then, the verdict is clear. Atheism is dead. The divine order endures. This is basically stylized or personified in terms of the mind of Plato, essentially. Plato argued actually in Laws that like the death penalty for atheists, because it's that dangerous of an idea. Essentially, when you erode the higher power, there's no like objective standard you can point to. That's why everything just goes down to it's just your opinion, brah. Like the whole moral relativism and all this kind of stuff. And essentially, like this is why we see even that like intellect goes on the same level of ignorance. There's no like objective standard we can point to. You know what I mean? And like for the materialist as well, the main thing to prove is the unchanging. How do you prove an unchanging standard? We just point to motion. This is from Heraclitus. Motion, everything in reality is in motion. Even a rock lying on the ground has atoms. Those atoms have electrons. Those electrons spin. Everything in the known universe is moving, which means another word for moving is changing, which means changing is unchanged. It's unchanging. So that's a unchanging principle we point to, which is how we get from philosophy to mathematics, to science, to physics, the law of gravity. You know what I mean? That's basically what, when we say that there's a divine order, there's a divine being, what we're pointing to is that there's unchanging principles that govern this reality. And with that, I end my opening statement.
All right, and with time to spare. All right, Myta, your opening?
Well, I didn't necessarily prepare an opening, but I'll go for it anyways. So generally, there's going to be a couple attempts to justify anything such as atheism being dead that you will see tonight on behalf of my opponent. One of the biggest ones will be a logical fallacy, which is directly tied to the idea or principle of Christianity being the overseeing arc or thing that created the ideas of morality. This is largely founded in the idea or the principle of a fallacy that is generally associated to or with what is referred to as the God of Gaps fallacy, in which people attempt to use religion to fill in the gaps of their knowledge of the understanding of things like moral principles or ideological frameworks that even they attempt to adhere to. Another great example of this is how many of the governing principles that are outlined within the moral guidelines of the Bible are fundamentally rejected in the modern day by most people who are Catholic or Christian in general, while also simultaneously claiming the death of atheism, which has actually been on the rise as of the last 60 years with a significant decline in Christianity, Catholicism, and an expansion of the Muslim empire throughout the entire world. We are seeing a fundamental shift away from the ideas of Christianity, Catholicism, and general religiosity when it comes to moral principles or even the frameworks that are founded within them. And there's no real reason to sort of ideologically back the religious principles because, in and of themselves, they don't rely on the morality that they were originally preaching or proposing, nor have any value in a modern sense as society has deviated so much away from what was originally founded upon. And to expand upon that a little bit, a lot of the logical experimentation that has been used to try to prove religion or religiosity throughout the history of like science or anything else has generally just attempted to be a complete failure. Even Aquinas's 5 ways was generally disproven as begging the question and creating logical fallacies in and of itself for its starting premise, and relying on leaps of faith or things like unsupported premises to be able to justify itself rather than having any form of existing entity or proving that existing entity completely infinitely of create or completely regardless of creating an infinite regression. The second one that I will talk about is the Kalam cosmological argument, which again fails to explain the nature of time and make any claim against the chaos theory or the randomness of universality, while simultaneously rejecting the scientific method that it claims to rely on, even creating a system in which it logically applies not only the failure to reason with the idea that a God doesn't exist or the beginning of being, but also scientifically rejecting the idea of universality in and of itself, completely independent of chaos theory.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. Tareyak, go ahead.
Is it open dialogue or is it rebuttals?
You can rebut that.
Yeah, I'm not a Christian, bro. I'm talking philosophy, not theology.
Is that the whole rebuttal?
Yeah.
Okay, so the problem with that is there are usually ties to the specific type of theological beliefs and the types of philosophies that you ground those theological beliefs in. A lot of examples of this is people who are religious, specifically coming from the Christian or Catholic camps, usually use the epistemological belief systems to try to justify the things that they believe. However, if you're going to take an ontological stance on these things, I think it is significantly harder to make a claim for things like objectivism if you were going to view it in that way.
All right, we might as well
So
just
open
get straight
dialogue
to
now, or-
open. Might as well just get straight to the open dialogue. Let's go.
Yeah, so again, I'm not talking about theology. I'm literally like pointing to Heraclitus, like the philosopher Heraclitus.
Sure.
So, like,
and in
in
this
terms
specific
like the-
circumstance, we're talking about religion, correct?
No, we're talking about atheism.
And atheism is a rejection of religion, is it not?
No, it's the rejection of the supreme being.
Well, generally speaking, a supreme being is attached to religion, as deities are specifically a derivative of divine knowledge, are they not?
Well, so like how Heraclitus would put it is like the flux that governs the cosmos of the flux is the principle that governs change across the universe, or the cosmos, as he would have called it.
Sure. But if we're going to talk about
religion.
metaphysical, sure. And if we talk about metaphysical changes and how the universe operates, there are a lot of specific things that
No,
you
not
can
metaphysical
use.
changes. Physical
These
changes.
would be metaphysical. Well, how do you determine whether or not something is physical or metaphysical without being able to have the scientific method to prove it?
Yeah. So the physical, it can be like measured. Like this is what the whole materialist is. Oh, I only have the empirical. I only want the empirical, the material. That's all that's real. But when you observe the physical, even like the scientists would agree, like everything is in motion. If everything is in motion, everything is in constant change. This change is unchanging. That's an unchanging principle. That is a divine principle. It's unchanging. Same way like the law of gravity all of a sudden doesn't change.
Well, the
Because
problem is
divine
you're
principle that
associating
governs.
divine to this. Divine specifically implies something that is of a higher being. This would be religious in nature.
Yes, a being. We are becoming.
Well, no, that's not what being
Yes.
means in this specific circumstance. I'm talking about an entity, not necessarily the
Maybe.
individual actor.
Yeah. So like a simple way, like Joe's simulation theory. Oh, like this is just all a simulation, all this kind of shit. Every simulation must have a power source.
Sure, I agree. There can be a power source
Yeah,
that exists
there's a higher
independent.
power to the simulation. That's
Do you
what
think that the
Christians mean when
higher
they say God.
So, okay, do you think the higher power in this specific circumstance always creates a system that leads back to a divine argument or a God rather than just a system that exists independent of our ability to observe it?
Yeah, what I'm doing is I'm making an observation of reality and then pointing that the observation of reality points to an unchanging principle. And that's how we got science in the first place. Science came from philosophy.
Sure, but again, this doesn't necessarily dictate the conclusion that you're arriving at of some level of divine like entity.
What, you talking about like Spaghetti Monster or BG Jesus or some shit like that?
I mean, it can be whatever you want it to be. That's the problem.
What? No.
see how-
what the
Ex-
fuck?
No, this is exactly how it works. You can
So,
use the
yeah,
justification of something.
So we
that
get
exists.
logic. One sec. We get logic from BG Jesus.
No, some people can derive logic from that. Some people can derive logic from
How?
other. This is the problem with
How
religiosity.
would you get unchanging principles from BG Jesus?
Well, you're just describing the God of gaps fallacy, as I talked about in my opening statement.
I'm like I said, I went purely philosophical. I never mentioned anything about the religion. I'm talking philosophers. That's why my whole opening statement was Plato. This is why bringing up Heraclitus' quote about the flux being the law that governs the change across the universe. This is an unchanging principle that's undeniable. For to even deny it requires motion. Everything presupposes motion in reality.
Yes, and what you're specifically referring to is divine intervention. You even used the term divine in and of your statement.
No, divine intervention. What? What do you think divine means?
Divine literally means like superseding like standardness, or creating something that is a god or godlike structure.
Yes, a higher power, an objective standard.
Yeah, okay. Let's assume that you don't.
The only way that is possible is for there to be a divine being or a supreme being.
No, so you're
because we are
begging
just
the question
becoming.
now. So what you're doing is begging the question. This is one of the standards that was held
No.
to one of the most, well, yes. So like
No, 'cause
Aquinas' 5
becoming-
ways. Are you familiar with this?
Becoming means it changes. Okay? Being means it never changes. It's unchanging. Right? So when you say supreme being, you're talking about like a higher power that never changes. This is why I'm pointing to a law. Like the law of gravity, for example. Like on Tuesday, all of a sudden the law of gravity the equation doesn't change.
Well, again, this is again, it's a non sequitur, because the law of gravity is something
Not
that
a non
exists
sequitur.
independent of our ability to confirm that this law is true, independent of our ability to test it. What we could be
We can't test
experiencing in
it.
this, we cannot.
Yes, we can. Motion is empirical, correct?
Yes.
Yes, so we can test it. We can provide a physical evidence that everything in the known universe is changing. And then we can
And
prove it
everything in
logically
the-
as well.
No, what I'm telling you, this is independent of what my claim was. What I'm telling you is our ability to be able to test this to the extent in which the technology we are currently limited could offer alternative means of being able to justify the phenomenon that we know as gravity. One of the ones that is commonly accepted, even amongst some of the top scientists and physicists, is centrifugal force.
Uh-huh.
Do you refute
A force presupposes motion.
that? Yes, but you have yet to link how motion could be a
because
divine
the claim,
idea
the
in
claim,
and of itself.
claim is that everything in reality is in motion. This is an
Correct.
undeniable claim. Yeah, and you agree. Yeah, which means change is unchanging. Change is constant, which means unchanging principles exist, aka laws of logic, laws of gravity, etc., etc.
Well, no, I'm telling you, I don't disagree with the notion that you were creating. I disagree with the framing that this could lead to a higher idea or a higher power of some sort in and of its creation. Just because it has a consistent.
What does that mean?
Sure, I can give you an example of this.
A higher
With
power of its creation.
Yes.
What does that mean?
So, okay, then let's go to that. How do you justify logically a series of events that leads to both something that is logically conclusive while also simultaneously not being able to put that through the scientific method?
Sorry, say that again. How can you
I said,
test?
how can you test something that you deem to be logically conclusive without being able to put that through the scientific method?
Yeah, you can test it.
Sure. Can you give me an
It's
example?
empirical.
Sure,
Motion is
when we
empirical.
talk, yes, and when we talk about empiricisms and the
Motion is
things that,
unchanging.
yes, and when we talk about
Yeah.
empiricisms and how these things affect each other, what is the
This-
relation that it has to some idea or concept of
So-
expanding divineness?
Everything in the physical changes. Correct?
Yeah, we're looping.
Yeah, I don't think you understand because I think you're kind of prepared for like you're going against a Christian and you had like this whole shtick with the Christianity thing, and then I hit you with philosophy, and now you're like, oh fuck. Like everything
no,
in the
I could-
known universe is changing.
Correct.
But that change is constant, which means there are unchanging principles, unchanging laws that govern reality. That's when
Okay,
if someone says, "Oh, like this is this exists, but it's unchanging. It's physical, but it's unchanging." It doesn't make sense. It ceases to make sense. You know what I mean?
No, my problem is not whether or not I expected a certain debate. My problem is that you use the term divine in reference to how these things work. This is generally a word or a term
Yes.
that is associated with something within a religious like system. Is it not?
No, Heraclitus was not a Christian.
That's fine. And again, you can
It's
use the
philosophy.
term independent of that.
It's philosophy, not religion.
So when you're making this claim that something is divine, are you referencing something that exists outside of religion or no?
It's a higher principle, a higher law of order. Like, are you
Okay,
going to
so
deny that the solar
is
system
this-
exists?
No, is this higher law of order
Yeah.
something that is derivative of a religious idea or concept?
No, it comes from Heraclitus, bro. One sec, I'll actually dig out the quote because you're going to agree with this. And this is why I say like atheism is dead, bro. Well, Heraclitus calls the logos, which again, I will admit, like the Christians, like copied a lot from the Greeks and all that kind of shit, particularly Aristotle. But one sec, where is it? Yeah, so the logos to point to the hidden rational structure of reality, the eternal principle of order, measure, and unity that governs change, or the flux as he refers to opposites and across the cosmos. Not merely human speech or logic, but something divine-like, common to all and often identified with ever-living fire that transforms all things while maintaining harmony.
So again, it uses the term divine. This is where I have the problem. Is it's generally we use the term divine to refer to something like a god or a supreme being or entity.
Yes,
correct?
being. What? Yes. So when you're saying being, it means that it never changes.
That's not the only use of the term being.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure people can bastardize words all they want. You know what I mean? They were trying to bastardize woman into saying, well, a man can be a woman, all this kind of shit. Doesn't make it true. You know what I mean? So, like,
Well,
in terms of
in the
when we're
same
saying
way that I
being
think that
versus
people-
becoming, yeah.
When the
So when
in
we're
the same
saying
way-
being versus becoming is this whole aspect of like everything in the known universe is becoming. Everything is in motion. But there are beings or higher level principles or laws. I guess law is probably the best way to describe it. But we're not talking legal laws, fuck like scientific laws, all this kind of shit. Where we even get that notion from goes back to Heraclitus when he points out that everything across the cosmos is in motion. But that means that change is unchanging, which means there must be an unchanging principle that governs the reality that we see, change that we see across the cosmos.
But the problem with this is, again, I can't stress this enough. This is something that exists independent of the scientific method or our ability to test.
Motion is testable.
Yes, motion is testable, but motion isn't directly linked to the
Can you
expansion
point me
of the
to
universe. It
anything
isn't
in the
linked
known
to the
universe that
universal
doesn't
legal.
change?
I'm sure there are many things that exist outside of our ability to be able to perceive them that do not change. Do atoms change?
Like what? You just said that
Atoms.
you're sure that there's things outside of our perception that doesn't change. You cannot make that claim. Like you're the one that's saying you have to have the evidence to prove that everything is in motion. But you just made a claim saying no, like I'm sure that there's things that we can't perceive that are unchanging. Which again
So-
points to a higher power, but you know,
No,
you
it doesn't
do you, bro.
necessarily point to a higher power. What I'm referring to is there are specific things
Yeah,
such
you
as
can't perceive
elements
it.
that are made up of atoms that do not change or decay over time. This is an example of one of those things.
Yes,
I'm not
those atoms have electrons. Those electrons spin.
You just asked
Motion.
me if it changed, and then you switched to motion. So you understand how you're just
Motion is
avoiding
change.
Motion is not change. Well, it depends on how you define change. But when we're talking about bastardizing words, I would generally think it refers to moving from one thing to another.
Changing. Yes.
So then you agree that there are things that do not change. So thus that notion would fundamentally
No, not
be
not in the physical
disregarded.
universe.
Okay, so when the scientific method proved that there are atoms that do not decay over time, you're disagreeing with this notion.
Those atoms have electrons that spin. There's still motion.
Okay. I'm going to try to frame this in a way you might be able to understand a little bit better. So,
Okay, yeah.
when we're talking about changing, we're not necessarily talking about how this thing moves or necessarily its state. We're talking about fundamentally switching
It's in a
from
different state.
one-
That's what change means. And the only way for him to get from one state to another state is motion.
That's not necessarily true.
What? Let's hear it out. Yeah. That was
Yeah.
not necessarily true.
So sure, when we're talking about the state of things, this doesn't necessarily refer to a specific type of thing. It refers to a instance in which that thing or entity, etc., exists within.
Yeah. So
without
how does
motion.
yeah. So how does one thing go to a different state without time, without motion, without any change?
Well, the
That's what you just
problem with
claimed.
that is time is relative. So if we're going to use time,
Oh
we have
my
to
God.
create something that exists within relativity. Or unless you disagree with that notion as well.
No, like we're going into like the Einstein and things and all this kind of shit. But even Einstein would agree everything in the universe is changing, is in motion.
Sure. And I
Like,
never
even when you
disagreed
do,
with that
even
statement.
when you've done the like the like, oh, but the atoms that like they don't change because they don't decay. It's like, yeah, but those atoms still have electrons and they're spinning, so it's constantly in motion. And if the motion is constant, if the change is constant, if the change is unchanging, then there's an unchanging principle that causes that governs that.
And what would that principle
AKA
be? This is the
a
problem. You've
supreme
given
being.
And what would that supreme being be? You keep making an appeal to this idea in which I keep trying to ask you what it is, and you keep changing.
Well, change is constant, but like, what you mean? Like, you keep asking me what
Well,
it
that's
is.
not an answer. If
Yeah.
if you ask me a question 3 times and I give you 3 separate answers and I say change is constant, this isn't an answer to my question.
Yeah, it's an undeniable fact. If you're to deny motion
That's
is
also
constant,
not
then
an
how are
answer
you
to
even
my
having this
question.
conversation? If you're to deny motion is constant, like, how are we even having this conversation without motion?
I'm sorry, are you even listening to me? I agreed with the idea that motion is constant. I'm asking you to give me an example of this divine rule, and you keep saying, you
Yeah.
keep looping into
Yes,
the
the
previous
change
argument.
is unchanging.
Change is unchanging.
Yes, change never stops.
Correct. So how does that create a divine principle?
It's an unchanging principle. A
Okay.
supreme being.
Okay,
An
that's supreme
unchanging
being.
principle.
What is okay? So the supreme being is an unchanging principle.
Yes, that's what being means. It means
In
unchanging.
this context, yes.
Yeah, so you agree. You're not an atheist. Alhamdulillah, habibi.
Wait. When did I ever say I was an atheist?
Because you're in a debate where I'm saying atheism is dead and you're against.
Yes. Does that mean that I have to be an atheist?
Bro, what are we doing here?
Well, what I'm attempting to do is I'm trying to get you to answer a question of how you logically justify the things you were saying, and you keep
Yes.
switching the topic.
But you agree? No, I'm not switching the topic. Like, I'm right on topic. I'm showing you that you're agreeing with everything I'm saying. You're like, I'm not denying that change isn't constant. Say, yes, okay, so then that's a law, an unchanging law that governs the change.
No, what I'm telling you is that there can be certain truths that exist within a statement that lead to things that are not logically following those truths.
So
If-
when we observe like gravity, right? And then we came up with the law of gravity. And you'd say like you cannot justify the law of gravity. That's what you're doing. You're denying like the laws of gravity, the laws of logic, all this kind of shit.
No, I'm not denying the laws of gravity or the laws of logic. What I'm telling you,
Yeah, they're unchanging principles. That like
No.
the law of gravity is an unchanging principle that describes gravity that we see in reality.
Yes, and I'm telling you that there are other phenomenon that exist that could also explain the phenomenon that we know as gravity. It's entirely possible, and science even acknowledges this under the scientific method, that gravity as we see it fundamentally may not be the phenomenon that
Oh yeah,
describes
like
what
you're saying, oh,
happens
in the
when we
future
describe
we might
gravity.
get more precise with the law or shit like that. Yeah, but that still doesn't refute the reference, like the thing that we're pointing to.
Okay, what
Just
is
because
the
we describe
reference
we
in
do
this
we
circumstance then?
just because we have like an ambiguous way of initially describing something doesn't mean that what we're describing is incorrect or it doesn't exist.
Okay, when I ask you this, what is that
Yeah.
reference then?
Gravity,
No,
like the physical measurable thing that we call gravity.
okay, so when I ask you what gravity is, the phenomenon we know as gravity, you said how we measure that reference may change in the future. What is that reference? You can't say
The
gravity
law
is
of
the reference for gravity.
law of gravity. So what we call big F equals big G, M1 M2 over R squared.
Okay, so that is the reference, correct?
That's an unchanging law, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Well,
That is
to
a
this point,
divine
yes.
principle.
That is okay. Again, I would hesitate to use the word divine in this specific circumstance as
Because you have some like daddy issues with Christianity or some shit like that. I'm not talking about Christianity, bro.
I haven't
we're
brought up the word
strictly talking
Christianity
about-
in almost 20 minutes.
It was your whole opening statement. So like this whole thing of like the like I don't want to use divine or I don't want to use I don't want to use pious or holy or whatever is a complete misunderstanding of like what these words actually mean.
What do you mean it's a misunderstanding of what these words mean? You
Yeah.
brought religion
So
into this with atheism.
No, you brought religion. Atheism's not a religion.
Atheism is a rejection of religion.
What are we talking about here?
if you are
Atheism's
talking
not a fucking
about-
religion.
No, I never said atheism was a religion. I said atheism is a rejection
and
of religion.
You brought
and we
Christianity
can't talk
into
about
this. Your whole
because-
opening statement is Christianity, bruh.
what is Christianity, Tareyak? Please explain that to me.
I know those that follow Christ.
It is
It's
what?
a cool dude, I guess.
It is what in practice?
Religion.
Yes. So if you have something that is a rejection of religion,
and
then you have to use
brought
religion
Yeah, you
into
brought
the
religion into this.
conversation.
You brought religion into this. Atheism is it's distinctly not believing in a supreme being. Correct?
I agree.
Yeah.
And
That's
that is
no
in
other
reference
religion.
to what?
I'm quoting ancient Greek philosophers here. This is philosophy, baby.
Which those ancient Greek philosophers were inspired by what? Religion.
No.
In many circumstances, yes.
What was Socrates why was the reason Socrates was executed?
I have no idea.
Oh my sweet baby Jesus.
If you're going to make the argument that because he rejected some of the principles of religion, you would realize that he's actually a nonconformist and he was actually of a specific denomination of Catholicism that was existing prior to the actual introduction of like the what was it called?
So
The church.
Catholicism existed before Christ.
No, I said, well, in some circumstances, yes, Catholicism did exist before Christ.
What is going on here? Like like, did you just hear what you just said?
Yes, because Catholicism became a organized institution after Jesus Christ died. But I believe it was the Second Temple of Judaism and the I want to say the Orthodox Roman Council, which actually introduced the teachings of Catholicism into the church after the death of Christ. This, as a fundamental concept, even under a different name, was still being practiced.
Before you said that Catholicism comes before Christ, or in some situations, Catholicism, you can make the case that Catholicism came before Christ. Makes no sense.
As a name,
like,
are you
seriously making the claim that like Plato, Aristotle, Heraclitus, like these were all just Christians?
No, I never said they were Christians.
Yeah, so like they didn't bow and worship to Zeus and all this kind of shit.
I mean, well, there were some that did, sure, but like again, these were non-denominational versions of religions of the time. Do you dispute this when there were even religious writings that came from Socrates? He talked about the divine mission.
I'm not disputing that there was a whole Greek pantheon, all this kind of shit. What I'm disputing is when we look at Plato's arguments against atheism, when we look at Heraclitus' argument for the flux, they're not pointing to a religion, bro. This is like strict philosophy.
Okay, so the problem is they're not necessarily pointing to religion, but they're using a religious principle or a foundational principle that was based in religion.
It's not
to
a religious
justify the
principle.
things.
Why are you taking the best philosophy has to offer and just giving it to the religious?
Well, I'm not actually. You didn't
Yes, you
even
are.
bother to
You're
ask
the
me
one that's
about some of the
claiming
other
that
things
fucking
did
Plato
this.
was a Christian or a Catholic or some shit like that.
Okay, so if you want to detach the idea of religion and the influence that it had of the time away from the philosophy, the
They did
problem
not get-
is
Socrates was
have to-
executed for disbelieving in the gods of the state.
correct, but he was still religious, was he not?
Oh my sweet baby Jesus. So he went against the religious
Don't
order.
bring Jesus into this. This man's suffered enough.
You're the one who brought Christianity into this, bro.
Well, I brought Christianity into this because it's the easiest religion to lump in when we're talking about a rejection of specific religious principles.
No, atheism is strictly the rejection of the rejection of a belief in a supreme being.
Yes, and
Yes.
what does
So no religion.
when-
I'd never mention religion.
you do realize that the belief of a supreme being is largely tied to religion, correct? You can't be religious.
No, you're
and
the
also
one that's
believe in a
tying it to
supreme
it.
being. Can you give me an example of any principle that believes in a supreme being that is not a religion?
Yeah. Heraclitus when he talks about the logos.
I must say, I'm not actually familiar with that. But I would argue that maybe if this is the case, there would still be a circumstance in which it is the rule rather than the exception when talking about a supreme being or using the term
What?
divine, that it's usually associated with religious ideology.
Yeah, like you're the one that's tying like extreme religiosity and all this kind of shit. Your whole opening statement was Christianity. Like, bro, like you need to kind of like get over, like get the chip off your shoulder of like Christianity. Because if you want to talk about Christianity, like, because pretty much you basically conceded the debate at this point. Like, what do you think the point of the Bible is?
It depends what part of the Bible are you referencing, but I would like to go back to the original idea
We
of
can
how
go.
you can't
we can
have.
go. No, you want to talk about Christianity? We can talk about Christianity. You know what I mean? Like,
No,
in
I don't
terms
want
of
to
like
talk
when
about
you
Christianity. If you want to, listen, if
why,
you want to
why
move
were you
on, and we
mentioning
can
in your
talk about
opening
it.
statement? Why are you running away now, bruh? Let's talk about
I'm not
Christianity.
running away. I'm trying to keep the
Yeah.
topic as it was before because you consistently are changing it. If you want to, if you want to say I don't want
I'm
to talk
changing
about
it,
this
yeah.
anymore and move on to Christianity, we can do so. Is that what you want to do?
You agreed with everything. Like you don't.
No,
you
I didn't agree with
that
everything.
motion. Yeah. Okay. So you agree that like everything in the physical universe is in motion. All right. You agree with that. Yes. Which means
Yes.
that that change is unchanging. You agree with that. Which means that there's an unchanging principle, divine law, whatever you want to call it, that governs the physical. And you agreed with that as well.
No, because there's a series of deductions that you are making that don't logically follow through this. You're
Okay. Where's
in-
the
in this
contradiction?
specific- the contradiction. Well, it wouldn't necessarily be a contradiction. The problem is it's it's a fallacy.
What does logic mean?
I
And again,
Depends
if you
on
make
what
a
definition
logical
of logic you
fallacy, it's
want.
still logical. What are you talking about? You just said it doesn't logically follow, and then you said it's a logical fallacy.
Yes, because a
You know
logical
what words
fallacy
mean.
doesn't- Yeah, I'm very aware of what words mean.
It doesn't follow, but it's still logical.
Okay, so again, when you're talking about logical fallacies, just because it falls within the circumstances of logic, or the
Logical fallacies are
definitions of-
logical.
Yes, but would you adhere to the idea of a logical fallacy
I
as
am
a
being
system
logical.
for self-government?
That religion is a system of self-governance?
No. When did I bring anything up about? Dude, you need to get past this. I don't know why you keep putting this on me and consistently loping back into religion. I never said
Says the dude
anything.
whose whole opening statement was about Christianity.
It was not about Christianity. I specifically talked
So
about.
you never
different
mentioned
religiosity.
Christianity.
No, I did. I
Okay,
already
so you
admitted
did-
that I
you
did.
did
Are
bring
you not
Christianity
following
into
your
this.
own conversation?
Bro, you're the one that done your opening statement. You're the one that brought Christianity into this. I was talking about Plato. I was talking about Heraclitus. I never
Yes.
mentioned anything got to do with religion. I know you're trying to do the religion thing and then trying to do the whole gaslighting thing where it's like, no, you're the one that's bringing Christianity into it because I'm like, I'm willing to engage if you want to talk about Christianity.
No, I'm not
But
talking
like
about
I said,
Christianity.
with my
The
arguments,
problem,
you haven't pointed out where the contradiction is in my argument.
because you consistently continue to loop this back into something that is away from every time I ask you about these principles or these governing systems, you seemingly completely want to go into a different topic.
No, what I'm saying is that there's motion is unchanging, change is unchanging. Ergo, there's an unchanging law that governs the cosmos. And then from that aspect, that proves that there are unchanging laws. For example, what we later discovered to be the law of gravity, which is what made it possible. Because otherwise, it's just pure chaos, pure randomness. You know what I mean?
Well, so
There is no objective standard.
Sure, let's run with that, right? Let's keep on this topic and not bring religion back into this. Are you capable of doing that? Perfect. I've mentioned it once. So just to be clear, when we're talking about chaos theory, specifically in regards to the randomness of universality, how do you make a claim that proves beyond reasonable doubt that there is a divine or governing principle that oversees this when this is scientifically rejected, like at a fundamental level?
Yeah, so all scientists will agree everything in the known universe is in motion.
Oh, so you're just not answering. Perfect.
I'm literally directly answering you. You just don't like philosophy.
This isn't philosophy. What you're talking about, the philosophical question. So again, you're attempting to do what is called a generic non sequitur. You are trying to intertwine the philosophical ideas with the scientific method when the scientific method makes no claims as to how philosophical systems work or how they should work. There is an is-ought statement here, which you are attempting to bridge by conflating one system of science with the second system of philosophy.
When did I say should or ought? You're just pulling random things. You're sinking, bro. You're flailing. Come on, let's stay on topic here. In terms of the unchanging principle that governs the change.
Then
so how do you explain? Yeah, how do you explain that change is constant?
Okay, no, I'll answer your question once you answer my original question. How do you explain?
All I've been doing is answering questions.
You have not. So just to be clear, the randomness of universality is something that exists within chaos theory as an understood principle. How do you argue against this when you claim that there is a divine principle or some form of governing principle that exists independent of that?
Identical macroscopic behavior despite having different microscopic details often governed by simple universal laws. Yes. So even the thing you quoted is a universal law.
No, it is not.
It's an unchanging law.
No, Kalam's cosmological argument is what I quoted, and in this specific circumstance, Kalam's cosmological argument makes no. Okay, thank you. It makes no attempt to actually propose how a divine entity, or a god can possibly exist in the state of being with how randomness of universality is applied. It is definitionally the base of chaos.
Yeah, no, this is like the for God posits that because the universe exists and began to exist, it must have a cause, which is identified as an uncaused necessary being, God. Right? I'm not saying that the universe began to exist or whatever. I'm just saying I'm noting an observation, which is the scientific method. First, you must observe the phenomenon. The phenomenon is motion. The phenomenon is change. Everything changes. If everything changes, that means the change is unchanging. And if change is unchanging, there must be some sort of law that governs that change.
So, the
law of gravity being an example of this.
Then we're going to loop back into my previous example of the observation.
Where's the contradiction?
We're getting there, I promise. So I'm going to loop back into what I had previously stated with the observation that you just claimed of these specific ideas or principles. With the observation of these things, these are generally governing principles that were once disputed to some extent. And then as a result of the technological advancement of science, we have attempted to make some form of cohesive idea or system of governance of these things. So when we attempt to look at these things, we can
a higher
see
principle.
Well, yes, yes, absolutely. We pursue a higher principle, but the problem is the
higher law, a divine law.
No,
sounds like a supreme
being. The statement that you are making is one that exists entirely of a relativist structure, as it has fundamentally changed over time, and we can't possibly know that this is the end of the system.
Structure. What are you talking about, bro?
We're not talking about philosophy anymore?
You do realize you're running away from my argument here?
No, I'm not. I just answered your question. If a divine principle...
Okay, so
let me ask you this.
Hold on. I'll repeat the argument again.
No.
Change is unchanging, correct? The only way to explain the fact that change is unchanging is that there's an unchanging principle causing the change, correct?
Yes. And the way that you are proposing
Yes.
this specific system and how it interacts with the universe is a complete logical leap. It is a leap of faith that I am
Where?
not going to take because I don't make the claim of objectivity in which you do.
Where? Where's the leap?
The leap is to presume that you have the general understanding or that anybody has the general understanding of how these systems work in their totality.
Okay, so then we can just throw out science then.
No, I'm not saying that we should throw out science. That's again
Your
straw man.
counter to my argument is you're presuming to know, or you're presuming to understand. No, I've made an argument that you can't refute, and now it seems like you're kind of like, oh fuck, like I thought it was just going to be an easy dunk on a Christian.
No,
I'm not Christian.
I wasn't here to argue Christianity. That's why I specifically brought up
Then
things
why
like
was it in your-
Catholicism,
why was it in your
Islam, and
opening
atheism.
statement? Why was it in your opening statement?
I've answered this 3 times now, but I'll go ahead and answer it again for you. When you're making a claim about atheism and how atheism works, it is a rejection of religious principles. And one of the religions that fundamentally guides...
It's a rejection of a supreme being.
A rejection of a supreme being is often associated with or tied to the idea of religion, is it not?
You're the one that's making that connection, bruh.
This is not me making this connection. This is how words work.
Saying the guy that says I didn't make a logical argument and then claimed there was a logical fallacy, proving that he himself wrong. You don't even know what logic means.
I know exactly what logic means. The problem that I'm having is that when
you don't.
So okay, then we can move forward from this. Simple question then. Do you believe that the idea of a divine principle or a divine concept or some form of divine law is detached from the idea of a religious concept or a god? Just answer yes or no and we can move forward from there.
Sure, yeah. Why not?
Okay, sure. So from this point on, we are not going to reference religion. If this divine concept or this divine principle as it exists through fundamentally unchanging law, what is your general criteria for this outside of the current data that we have within science, not philosophy, to determine that this is something that we can't otherwise have independent of testing?
Philosophy. Science came from philosophy. What does PhD stand for?
Well, science may have come from philosophy.
What does PhD stand for?
It's a general, or Jesus Christ. It is a, wait, I don't even remember what the P stands for.
A doctorate of philosophy, you thick cunt.
But anyways, like, we'll move on.
Yeah.
So
you're pointing to science when science came from philosophy and so we're not going to talk about philosophy anymore. Science
I said that we could talk about philosophy. Well, just chill out. Calm down for a second. I said we can talk about these things.
You're flailing.
No, I'm trying to explain to you where your problem is. My problem is science.
Okay.
Yes, science is a derivative of philosophy, but they attempt to do fundamentally different things. The scientific method is completely independent of philosophy. It attempts to create, using the scientific method, to be able to determine truths. These things are relatively objective. However, the problem is when you have objective. Well, yeah, you could argue that because there is a consistently changing idea or a consistently changing understanding of those things, which is an argument for relativity.
Yeah, but that we're noting our own intellect at that stage, not the observable universe.
Yes, but our own intellect is the limiting factor of whether or not we can have that observing. Sure. Do you like? But how do you come to the conclusion we are not a god if we're not bringing religion into this? You remember when we said we wouldn't bring religion into this going forward, and now
again, you're the one that's
bringing
it up. You're the one that's bringing up religion.
I never brought it up.
I never mentioned the word religion.
You just brought up God. How can you have a God without a
God
religion,
is
Tareyak?
supreme being.
So how do you detach the idea of a God from religion then?
Yeah, so for example, like the Buddhists, they call themselves atheists, right? They say there is no, spaghetti monster, all this kind of shit. But then they'll also say there's Dharma, which is basically Heraclitus's logos, saying that there's a law governing the change across the cosmos.
Sure. And when we attempt
and from that one bright idea is where we get science.
And yes,
that's the justification for science.
I don't deny that it came from philosophy. What I'm telling you is that the idea is
it's the foundations. Philosophy is the foundations of science. Like, because of that observation, we then know that we should pursue, because these unchanging laws exist, we should discover them.
Yes, and the motivations that came from the philosophical
And from
ideas,
that, we get the scientific method.
and again, if you would let me finish, the original principles that came from those specific ideologies don't make any claim as to how these things work objectively. These were just a general, I would argue they were to some level even a pseudoscience, because a lot of the religious concepts that existed from those original principles, even from things like Buddhism, etc., they were fundamentally disproven as time goes on, because our ability to be able to test these things through the scientific method has actually done retractions as to the original belief systems of these
Yes,
people.
but they'll never deny the logos. They'll never deny that change is unchanging.
That is independent of whether or not the original claim exists. They can use that claim for justification
an
of
unchanging
their
principle.
ideology. Again, they can
The
use
supreme being
that.
exists.
They can use a scientific truth as a justification for a claim which can be false. The falsifiability of the claim does not undermine the scientific truth that is based upon.
Yes, but when you say scientific truth, you're presupposing philosophical truth.
No, because science and philosophy attempt to do fundamentally different things.
Okay, what's the difference?
Sure, science attempts to find objective truths, things that cannot be falsified in specific circumstances or
So
ways.
objective truth does exist.
However, philosophy, I never claimed that it didn't. But just to be
Yeah,
clear,
so
to
if an
expand
objective
upon that,
truth exists, there must be an unchanged truth is unchanging, correct?
sure, you can make that
That's
argument.
an unchanging principle. Truth is a divine principle.
And how do you determine whether or
Unbelievable.
not that unchanging truth exists as an unchanging or divine principle or not?
Because if the truth was to change, that truth, that specific truth, then truth would be incoherent.
And
You'd be breaking the first law of logic.
I'm
There's a
going to,
delineation between like truth and like falsities or falsehoods.
and there are specific things that exist as falsehoods or falsifiable, previous falsifiable truths that we generally accepted as truths, which were not.
Yeah.
There are circumstances
Doesn't mean truth doesn't exist.
I never disagreed with that notion. The problem that I'm having is that there are simply things that presuppose a conclusion that you are adhering to from the truth itself, and then creating a statement that is not true in and of itself as well.
I have no clue what the fuck. I think you're just like trying to pull words. You know what I mean? Like you're saying that like truth is objective. Like you accept truth to be like. If you accept that there's an objective truth, what are you pointing to?
Well,
Because
I'm
everything
not-
in one sec. As a materialist, everything in the material world changes. So you're saying that truth is objective and it doesn't change. So what are you pointing to justify that?
So sure, let me explain what an objective truth is then. When I talk about an objective truth, I
No.
mean
What are you
something that is
pointing to make that
Sure,
claim?
I can give you an example. The laws of mathematics.
No, point to something physical, like I did.
Wait, so you're telling me mathematics aren't an objective truth?
No, I'm saying mathematics is not physical.
So mathematics are a governing
To
system. It
prove
doesn't
to
need to be
prove that
physical.
mathematics even exists, you have to first make an observation on the physical.
Yes, and the observation
empirical.
is required by the observer or the agent in this case.
Yes, and that observation is motion. Motion is an unchanging thing.
No, motion is not an observation. Motion is a state.
What are you talking about?
Okay, so I
Motion.
can't believe
You
I have
can't
to explain
observe.
this.
You can't observe motion. So you cannot see my hand moving. You can't see me. Like, is this what we're doing?
No, it's not what we're doing. It's your failure to interpret what I said. I never said motion was not observable. I said motion is not an observation.
So you cannot observe motion. Is that what you're saying?
I can't tell if you're trolling me or not right now.
I genuinely do
Chat,
not
am I being
understand like
gaslit
what the
right
fuck
now?
you're talking about.
I said motion is not an observation. Motion is observable. You can observe motion without motion as an
Okay,
observation.
Yeah, and everything in the universe is in motion.
So does that mean everything in the universe is observable then?
No, is
Okay,
motion.
so then you agree with
This
me.
is everything in the known universe, or even you could say the unknown universe as well. Like, is it a principle of the universe, of the cosmos, whatever word you want to use, that everything is changing?
We've already covered this.
Yeah, so I don't see where you disagree. You're saying, well, like you're being illogical, and then you say I'm using a logical fallacy, which means I am being logical. It's just I'm being fallacious. But then when you point at the fallacious thing, like I said, it doesn't dispute my argument.
Well, because your argument's incoherent is the problem.
Okay, what's incoherent about it?
Well, we just went through the observable motion versus observing motion whole argument of incoherency, and now we're moving on to the next thing.
Observable motion. Yeah, one's just like the actual person seeing it versus the actual like. But you would not deny that motion, like everything is in motion, correct?
We've already covered this. This is the
so if everything is in motion, even to evoke the word everything, right, requires some sort of higher being.
Well, again, that higher being has to be demonstrated.
Yes, through motion. We observe motion. Everything in the known universe, across the cosmos, is change. Change is unchanging, which means there's an unchanging principle that causes change.
No, the problem that I have is I
have is I don't like Christians, Tareyak, and you're not allowed to use words like divine and supreme being and all this kind of shit.
Are you schizophrenic?
No, I'm just quoting back your own words. Your whole opening statement was about Christianity, bro. You made the claim that Catholics existed before Christ. That Christianity existed before Christ. That was one of your claims.
Yes, and I justified that claim, and you didn't refute it.
Am I being schizophrenic, or am I just repeating your own arguments back to you?
If you are repeating my own arguments back to me, you're failing to understand them, because we already agreed that religion was not to be brought into this.
Failing to understand how Christianity can come before Christ. It makes no sense.
Well, just to be clear, it was Catholicism, not Christianity, but you know.
Okay, Catholicism specifically, I guess. Okay, yeah, Catholicism existed before Christ. So who the fuck were they talking about?
Why are we continuously looping back?
Who were they talking about?
You said we weren't going to talk about religion. You keep looping it back into religion.
You were calling me schizophrenic, and I was like, I can recall the conversation, but you clearly can't, because you're just throwing out like random shit.
I'm not throwing out.
You're saying, "Oh, that's fallacious," but you're not showing me how it's fallacious.
Because I'm trying to explain it, and then you keep saying, "Oh, well, you have daddy issues. You have a hate boner for religion," but we're not talking about any of those things.
Okay, then
did you or did you not say those things?
What my argumentation's fallacious then?
That is exactly what I would get to. So can we hone in on exactly why atheism is dead and the primary argument for atheism being endangered?
Yeah, so like this whole notion of atheism, despite what Daddy Issues over here wants to talk about with the Catholicism existing before Christ and all this kind of shit, atheism is saying I don't believe in a supreme being. And from atheism we get goofy concepts like moral relativism. Holy shit. And basically just degrades society. That's my whole opening statement. You can go back and, like, not even my words, it's Plato's words. Plato would give the death penalty to atheists. Like, if Plato was alive modern day, he'd be like, wipe him out. These people are retarded. You know what I mean? Because to deny an objective principle, a divine law, you cannot make an argument. Because the only way to make an argument is to point to logic or reason. But you say you don't believe in those divine principles. And then you say, well, what about the scientific method, which again is a divine principle?
Well, okay, that is independent of whether or not someone believes in a god or a deity. A god or a deity is
a god is a supreme being. It is a divine law, divine principle, unchanging.
Okay, so then you understand that a god or a supreme being, it can be independent of each other. You've already said that a god and a supreme being can be independent of each other. A god and a deity or a deity, they're not, just to be clear. But in this specific circumstance, even a deity can be independent of a divine idea. And this is why I asked you if we could detach the idea of religion from this specific use of terminology.
The divine idea. No, you wanted to separate it from religion. Which I did. I pointed to philosophy. That's been my whole case.
And in the philosophical arguments you used, they were in some circumstances based in religion. This is what I described previously as...
Where?
I
what religion?
Explained this to you.
What religion?
There are many religions. You talked about the pantheon. We talked about non-denominational religions. We talked about other things in which we're making unjustified, like illogical appeals to specific gods or deities.
What religion is Heraclitus pointing to when he talks about the logos? One sec. Let me get the full quote.
I'm going to do the quote again. So while you're looking that up, I'll explain it then. So when we're talking about the idea or principle of atheism being a rejection of a god or deity, we've already agreed this can be attached from the idea of a divine principle by his own understanding of the word divine principle, or an irrefutable system that exists independent of a god or deity. So thus your justification for atheism being dead would have nothing to do with rejecting these principles themselves, unless those principles were backed by a god or deity directly.
Eternal and universal. It is the rational principle or structure according to which everything happens. All things come to pass in accordance with the logos. Most people fail to grasp because they live private illusions or sensory confusion, even when it's pointed out. Case in point.
Speaking of delusion, can you tell me what the word the logos means?
Yeah, it means word.
Word or reason. And it is what?
Yeah, so it's like when the French say je ne sais quoi.
Yes, and specifically the logos when you're talking about Greek.
So
when you're
talking the same way the French say, when you say, just for the audience, when you say je ne sais quoi in French, that means I do not know. It's that I do not know. I don't have a word for it. But
it is a theological concept, by the way.
It's not a theological concept.
Really, go ahead and Google it for me, bud.
So getting back to the logos argument, it's like the rational ordering principle, law-like structure, or intelligible pattern immanent in the cosmos. Do you deny this, or are you saying this is religious?
No, I'm not saying either, which shows that you are not listening to my line of argumentation. My specific claim is that you cannot demonstrate how this works while simultaneously claiming some form of objectivism as... No, that's not how the word empirical works either. But just
it's physical, yes. Measurable.
Well, yes, physical and measurable systems can exist independently.
Motion is physical and measurable, correct?
Yes, but the conclusion...
Alhamdulillah, Habibi, we got there.
No. You think you got there. Now, let me explain why you didn't. So
it's not empirical.
The problem is...
Motion is empirical, yes. Okay, I'm pointing to motion to make my argument.
Okay, well, if you're just going to continue talking over me, I'm going to continue talking over you. I can do this all night. So the problem is that we have a system in which it applies some level of understanding to these things. If you are going to make a claim as to how objectivism applies to the thing you are citing, and then simultaneously, I'll explain it when I'm done.
Let him finish.
If you're going to make the claim as to how objectivism points to the belief system that you have or the system that you are citing, you have to give an example of how that system fundamentally leads to the conclusions that you are drawing, which you cannot do.
I've done it multiple, but we'll do it again. Okay. Motion is everywhere. Yes.
Okay.
The whole cosmos is becoming. Correct.
Sure.
Yes. Okay. That means that change, in reality, change is unchanging. Change is constant. Correct.
Sure. Let's run with that.
Whatever law governs that change. An example of one of that would be the law of gravity.
Tell me what that law is.
Yeah, an example of it would be the law of gravity.
No, I don't want an example of it. I want you to tell me what it is.
I just demonstrated it.
No, you did not. You said you said
but
motion.
Where
and
do
then
we get?
You gave me an example of it, and then you said gravity.
I said
want
motion.
An example of it.
Motion
I want the
is
law.
Motion is unchanging. Correct.
You can argue that, sure.
Yeah. So there is some sort of law that describes that change.
Yeah. What is that law?
The law of the universe.
Okay,
we haven't cracked that yet. We need to wait on the scientists.
What
you're asking for is what is the law? Yeah. What you're asking is the law of the universe.
Yes, and how can you make an appeal to that if you don't know it? Is my problem. This is what I've been trying to get you to answer.
That's where we get the law of gravity from.
Well, the law of gravity, again, I've already explained this. The law of gravity can be a phenomenon that exists independent of our understanding of what the phenomenon we know as gravity is. This is the problem that I have.
It's objective.
No, it's not objective, just to be clear. You can argue that you can argue that the mathematics are objective, but the phenomenon we know as gravity can also be explained by multiple other phenomena, such as centrifugal force.
But there's still the law of gravity. You know what I mean?
Okay, so do you believe that the law of gravity is unfalsifiable?
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that in terms of like all this change that we're seeing across the universe, there exist unchanging principles to describe those changing phenomenon. Do you agree or disagree?
I would agree, but I would say that those
so what you're doing there is you're pointing to
what
you're doing there is you're pointing to a supreme being.
No, just to be clear, that is not true. You're presupposing that conclusion.
There is something that's non-physical that governs this or that describes this.
No, I wouldn't argue that it is non-physical. I would say it's non-observable.
So mathematics is physical. The law of gravity is physical.
You could argue that you could argue
The
it's
law
physical because
of
of the
gravity is
implication.
physical.
You
This
could
is why
argue this,
Plato was
yes.
like, just give him the death bounty. Just give him the death bounty. So, like, what are we talking about? Like, yes, the law of gravity is physical. I'm not talking about gravity. Gravity is physical, but the law of gravity is non-physical. Correct?
Okay. Yes and no, because you need the physical
Yes
element.
and no.
Yes, because
Motherfucker.
Okay, I can explain this. Again, if you can't keep up, that's not my problem. So when we're talking,
You're the one who's
about
saying
physical
yes and no.
entities-
Same,
Well, again,
same, but different.
Yes, because again, I can explain this if you would just allow me to. When we're talking about physical entities, we have things that exist relative to our tangibility or our understanding. If our understanding of these things is incomplete and as a result it is intangible, it is entirely possible it could be a physical or non-physical entity that we are either observing or it's something that exists outside of our ability to understand.
Yeah, are thoughts physical?
You could argue that they are, sure. They come from electrons that are made inside of our head as the neurons fire off,
They
and
come
that is
from
a
electrons.
physical. Yeah. When our neurons fire off, there are electrons in our neurons that create electrical waves that move through our brains that create thoughts. This would be a
And
physical
yeah,
observation.
but what causes the electrons?
I'm going to be real with you. I don't know what causes an electron. Can you give me that answer?
You're the one that's making the claim that these thoughts come from electrons. So, like,
Sure,
how
and
many?
I'm completely,
Can I
I'm
pump
completely
electrons into my
ignorant
head?
here. No, I'm giving you the
Yeah,
opportunity.
can I-
I'm ignorant
can
here.
I
How do
pump-
you make an electron?
I'm the one that's asking you. You're the one that was like teaching me.
Well,
here.
yeah,
You're
and
just
I'm
saying that,
telling
like,
you,
thoughts are
I'm
physical.
retarded. I deserve
You
the
made
death
the
penalty.
claim.
Tell me how electrons are made.
You're the one that
please.
made the claim.
Tell me how the electrons are made. You just asked me and now you won't answer it. I'm retarded.
You're the one
Remember?
that made
Explain
the
it to me.
claim.
Teach
You're the one that
me.
made the claim. Don't
Teach
get emotional.
me, Tareyak.
You're the
I'm
one.
not
Yeah, you're the
emotional.
one. You're the one that made the claim that thoughts are physical.
I'm asking you to teach me. I'm saying that thoughts come
You made the
from
claim.
Yes, I will
Tareyak,
reiterate
teach
my
me
claim.
about my claim.
No, I'm
What?
telling you.
What is going on
I'm
here?
telling you
What
that
the
as
fuck is
electrons
going
are
on?
fired and neurons are fired, it creates an electrical
You
pulse
said that
moves through
thoughts
the
come from
brain, and it
electrons.
creates. Yes, the electrons are required for those neurons.
They're
to
required,
fire.
but they don't
Then-
come from.
Well, I mean, generally, you would argue that, sure, but like again, the problem is you said, where does an electron come from, or how does an electron work? Tell me, where does an electron come from in this specific
I
circumstance?
don't know. You're the one that made the claim that
Exactly.
thoughts all of a
We
sudden
do
are
not
physical.
know. We do
How much does
not
a thought
know
weigh?
is my claim. I again, I don't know that. This is something that we cannot observe.
Yeah.
It exists independent of our observation. This has been my claim the whole time.
So now you're saying that non-empirical stuff is empirical. Like, do you
No,
not
I'm
see
not
the
saying-
retardation that's going on here?
No, because you're attributing the idea of empiricism to something that is not empirical. This is what
You're
okay,
the
hold on.
one that said that
this is
thoughts
retarded. No.
are physical.
What I'm talking about here is specifically the fact that you're trying to adhere to an idea or a principle of what philosophy and science has attempted to do over the last almost 3,000 years in explaining things that cannot be observed or understood by the human mind as of right now due to technological limitations. And you're asking me to answer these questions and then positing that I'm
Yeah, I'm
stupid
making-
because I can't.
Yeah. I'm making a logical argument of why.
No,
there's
you're
a
not
supreme
making a
being.
logical argument. What you're doing
Yes,
is
I
you're
did.
adhering to a logical fallacy.
Otherwise, you would have. Again, a logical fallacy is logical.
Sure, but why
What
would
is
you want to
going on?
base your
You're-
idea
You're
on
not
an
making a logical
unsound
argument. You're making a
framework?
logical fallacy. So I'm making an argument that's logical, but you think is fallacious, but it's still logical.
fallacious.
So then again, you're wrong on your claim that I'm not making a logical argument. You just claimed I'm making a non-logical argument or an illogical argument, and then claim that I'm making a logical argument.
So, okay, the problem is when you use a logical fallacy, it is an unsound argument based on a system of flawed
Yes, it
logic,
don't
or it would
sound.
just be logical.
Yeah, it's unsound, but it's still logical.
Sure, okay, and I believe that in a logically
Okay, so
sound
you're the one
world,
that's
your
misusing
argumentation
words.
doesn't exist. No, I just actually used it in the exact like terminology it's described for. The problem is you can use
No, you made the
misinformation, false
claim that I
information,
made
or
an illogical
pseudoscience to
argument,
be able to
and then
adhere
directly
to a
after
system.
that, you said, "Oh, you made a logical fallacy," which means you made a logical argument. That's unsound, but it's still logical.
Yes, because there can be logical arguments that are based on misinformation or otherwise untrue
Yeah, so I'm still
information
making
that
a logical
leads-
argument.
You know what? Sure, I'll grant you this. You're making a logical argument
Finally,
based on a fallacy.
it's pulling
and
fucking teeth
misinformation.
with this going. Holy shit! How much do I get extra
okay.
for being a dentist?
I'm sorry. I'll be as good faith as possible here. You are logical in your misinformation and your inability to make a sound argument. Is this better for you?
Okay, so what is the fallacy that I'm making here?
Yeah, you're begging the question, and specifically referring to the God of gaps fallacy.
What question am I begging here?
Yeah, the question that you're begging is you're working backwards logically as to how you're making your specific thesis, right? You are presuming that you are correct from the start, and then using that correct.
No, I'm not.
You absolutely
No, I'm not.
are.
I'm not doing tag. This is another thing. How I knew that you prepared. You're like, I'm gonna roast this Christian. I'm not a Christian, bruh.
When did I bring
I'm not
up
Jay
Christianity?
Dyer. I'm not your daddy. Okay, I'm making a philosophical argument here.
When did I bring up Christianity? What are you talking about?
I'm not doing tag here. I'm pointing to an empirical fact of the known universe, and from that I'm deducing and proving that immaterial laws, divine laws, exist. Mathematics exist, even though it's not physical.
So again, I already said that there can be physical and non-physical entities or things that exist independent of those.
How do you prove that? How do you prove that?
Well, that's the problem. Is that
how do you prove that non-physical laws exist? Go ahead.
Yeah, sure, and I can explain this. The way you do that is you would make an appeal to, like, I guess what you would call a lack of information. We don't have the technological ability or the understanding to be able to prove these things beyond reasonable doubt. When you apply reasonable doubt specifically to these things, you have a circumstance in which you must accept either the most reasonable cause or the most likely cause to determine whether or not something exists within probability. Then you can use a series of deductions or inductions based on that information to determine whether or not it follows the scientific method.
Yeah, but again, like, even for us to value the scientific method, you are presupposing that the scientific method exists. I'm telling you, prove that the immaterial exists.
That's the problem. You can't prove a negative. This is a logical fallacy.
How is that a negative? Prove that the immaterial exists.
Yes, because if immaterial, what does immaterial mean to you?
Non-physical.
No, immaterial doesn't mean non-physical. It means independent of circumstance. And if something is independent of circumstance, how do you prove that it exists? You can't prove a negative. Because
so I'm talking about physical and non-physical. Mathematics is non-physical, correct?
You could argue that. We already went over this.
Yeah, so
twice.
when you're talking about the non-physical, how do you prove the non-physical exists?
Well, that's the problem. You can't prove a non-physical entity exists without a physical observer.
Okay, so you're just doing dogma then. Your dogma is just a scientific method.
It's not dogmatic in any way. No.
It is. Okay, what's the difference between dogma and an axiom?
An axiom generally is a idea or a principle that can be broken down into a system of, I guess, what you would call truths, versus being dogmatic is something that is, I guess, what you would call an undeniable
truth. Yeah, so the both taken is true.
Both presumed.
Both the same thing.
Yes.
Yeah, so they're the same
but they're
thing.
Fundamentally different, because an axiom can be created. An axiom.
Yeah, no, the scientist talks about axioms. The religious talk about dogmas, and then you criticize the religious, saying you and your dogmas, but it's the same thing. You have axioms. You can't actually prove. Yeah, you're just blindly following science. You actually can't prove the science is valuable.
Is your argumentation because the science is not valuable?
You've also taken atheism as a dogma as well.
Well, no. Is your argumentation here that science is not valuable?
No, I can prove that science is valuable.
Yeah, I can too. Then why did you make the claim that I'm assuming that science
you
is
just
not
said
valuable?
You just said no, I can't. You said that's where the problem is, and we actually can't do like are you what is going on?
Well, no, okay. Do you think that there's a difference between okay, let me ask you this, right? If we have a theory, something that we can't prove definitively or concretely, but is the most likely or the most probable outcome or answer to a question that we have, but despite the lack of ability through technology or our observations cannot concretely prove, do you think we should completely disregard this theory?
No, I guess.
Okay, so then you can accept the idea that we can have systems in which
everybody lies.
The most probable cause for something without definitively knowing that that is it. This is how scientific circumstances work.
I know how to reach these kids, okay? Remember when Dr. House says, like, everybody lies? Yeah?
Sure.
Yeah, so like, how does one ascertain truth when everybody lies?
Well, you use the scientific method.
You use the laws of logic.
But you've already ascribed to the fact that logic can be flawed, and it exists within things like fallacies and misinformation. Yes, because we went over this earlier. I specifically told you that you use a logical fallacy based on misinformation and a lack of understanding of things to justify those principles.
When you say like the scientific method, what you're presupposing is the laws of logic. This is why, like, Dr. House is like Sherlock Holmes, like 100% logistician, like everything has a reason, everything has a cause.
Well, it depends on what kind of logic you follow, because there are things like circular logic. There are things like there are multiple different types of logic.
The fundamental laws of logic.
Can you explain to me the fundamental laws of logic then, and how they apply to different ideologies?
First law is the law of identity. Second law is law of non-contradiction, and third law is law of excluded middle.
Yes.
Meaning, we can identify things. So A, for example, and then A equals A, right? A doesn't equal B. So we have A, B's, let's just use the alphabet, right? A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all that kind of shit, right? We identify all these things. And then then this is where we get to the second law, which is the law of non-contradiction. A does not equal not A.
Yeah, I'm aware. And the problem that I have is the law of the excluded middle, which specifically is a proposition that states that something that is either true or the negation of truth
those fundamental
with no other
laws.
Option. And this is the problem that you reject.
Without those fundamental laws, like none of this is possible. We aren't even able to have a coherent argument.
Well, I feel like I'm not having a coherent argument now, but that's a different problem in and of itself.
No.
The third law of logic, in which we talk about the excluded middle, is either that there is a truth or a non-truth system with no other option.
Yes, we're on the law of identity. Yeah, we're on the law of identity, right?
And I don't disagree with. Okay, listen to me. If I agree on the first two propositions and not the third proposition, then why ought we not talk about the third proposition?
Yeah, so I'm not making a short argument. So if A equals A, can A equal not A?
No.
Alhamdulillah. That's a foundational truth.
Yes, I never disagreed with this logic. You just like hearing yourself talk. Yes, so let's get on to the third one.
To prove that that's an unchanging principle, what do we have to appeal to?
You have to appeal to logic. That's what this is. This is what we're talking about, the laws of logic.
No, my empirical argument.
Yeah, in your empirical argument, and empiricism and how you use the logic is fundamentally flawed.
Proves the empirical proves the logic. Goes both ways. It's bisexual, my friend.
I know a lot about that, believe it or not. So we're talking about the excluded middle specifically, and the thing that you want to avoid, in which there is an assertion or a proposition that either a truth statement exists or there is a negation of that truth with no other option. What I'm telling you is that you are ignoring this conveniently. Notice how you went completely past the third law of logic and only talked about the first two that we agreed on, because you know that this exists independent of your structure. Okay, how does it exist independent of my structure? What are we even talking about? I already demonstrated this to you, and I talked about how there can be physical and non-physical entities that exist independent of the laws of logic. But how would you prove the non-physical? You have to use the empirical. Problem. What else? One sec. What else do you have to prove the non-physical? I can explain. Other than physical. I've already done this. You require a physical being or an actor in this specific circumstance to be able to observe this specific phenomenon, and that's how you prove it. The problem is when you're working with you use the physical to prove the non-physical. Yeah, and when you're working with imperfect information, yes, you said yes to that. You use the physical to prove the non-physical. How do you do that outside of that, Tareyak? Explain it to me. That's what I'm pointing to with motion. I'm using a physical phenomenon to prove the non-physical law behind it. All right, perfect. So I'm glad you agree with me completely. We're going to move on past that then. So what we're talking about, you're the one that denies the supreme being. No, that's not at all the case. So what I'm talking about is we're using. So you don't deny a supreme being. I never. Well, okay. I think I just converted someone, boys. No, it depends on what you're referring to as a supreme being, because we're talking about two things independent of each other. Your idea of a supreme being is based in the idea that it presupposes you are correct in your assessments of how those things work. You conflate science and philosophy, and
I'm
then
not presupposing anything.
Can we just talk about the excluded middle, please? Like, you keep on trying to deviate away from
You're
this
the one that's saying that you're presupposing and like you're basically trying to use, like, because I've heard the arguments before, like you're trying to use like tag counters and all this kind of shit. I'm not making a tag argument. I'm pointing to motion, an empirical phenomenon.
Okay,
I'm using the empirical, which you just agreed with. This was actual like sound argumentation that you agreed with, that we use the empirical to prove the non-physical or the logical or the logos, as Heraclitus would put it, right?
And we can go back to my original.
Logos. I think we should go back to logos. But
we can
in terms of like this, you agree with this as a believer in the scientific method and all this kind of shit, right? So you've just agreed to my argument.
No. So again, when we're talking, let me explain it in a way that you can understand. I might have agreed with the principle that your argument is founded upon, but the truths that your argument are founded upon lead to inconsistencies and logical fallacies that I don't agree with. And that's because when we're talking about, I keep trying to explain it, but you keep wanting to run off on something else. So when I explain it this time, I would hope you would answer instead of running away for a 16th time. When we're talking about the law of the excluded middle, it is either a truth or a negation of truth with no other option. When we talk about how we have a system in which we have a limitation of technology and require a physical actor to observe a non-physical entity or a system or a governing principle, how do you determine whether or not we have the complete information of that claim before determining that it is objective? The simple answer is
okay. I can give the easy counters. The easy counters, like imagine we're on the beach right now. Kai's got his little cocktail, maybe a mojito or something like that. We got the sun hat on. Beautiful, right? Sure. We're on the beach, right? Is there a finite amount of grains of sand on that beach?
I would have to say yes. There cannot be an infinite amount.
But you haven't tested it. You haven't like literally picked up every single individual and counted it. You don't know the total number of grains of sand on that beach, but you were somehow able to determine that there is a finite amount of grains of sand on that beach.
But this is the problem. You're adhering to the God of Gaps fallacy, and you're creating.
I'm not doing God of Gaps.
You are.
You done the grains of sand of the gaps. Apparently.
The grains of sand of the gaps. All right. So we're going to go ahead and run with that. Then. So when we talk about the God of the Gaps fallacy, it specifically implies that there are certain circumstances where you overlook the lack of ability to test a system or a principle or even a structure, and you just assume it to be true because it is either the most likely or the most conclusive thing. No, I did not.
Which you just done. Yes, you did. There's a finite amount of grains of sand on the beach.
Okay, so then let's talk about
Is it possible to count every single grain of sand on that beach?
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's impossible to physically go through each grain and count each grain, correct?
No, it would be possible. The problem is,
did you one sec? Did you do the test to verify that when you claimed that it was finite?
No.
What was your reasoning? What was your reasoning for saying that it was finite?
The reasoning for saying that it is finite is because you adhere to a system or a structure in which you appeal to the most likely or the most probable outcome. Thus, if that amount of sand was infinite, it would be untestable, but we know this to not be true.
Yeah, so again, like I said,
answer my question then. Instead of asking me a question, answer my original question.
We're not running away from this. We're not running away from this because you
ran away from
this. You just done the exact same logic that I just applied.
No, my friend. Answer my question.
There's no kind of like, okay, we need to empirically prove and count and have a definitive number of the amount of grains of sand on that beach. But we can make the claim that there is a finite amount of sand, grains of sand on that beach because of the impossibility to the contrary.
No,
it cannot be infinite.
Impossibility. I never said the impossibility of the contrary. I said what is probable.
Yeah,
I never said what is possible.
That's
like when you talk about impossible, that means that it cannot be. There are circumstances in which probability can determine whether or not something can be possible, regardless of its probability.
Yeah, it would be impossible for the beach to have an infinite amount of grains of sand. Correct.
Well, that's the problem. Is that until we test it,
that's not a problem. That's just a fact. Yes or no?
Well, no, that's a problem. That is definition of what a problem is. It is something that
definitively, you literally done it right in front of everybody. 4K HD, take the pictures, boys. You literally said there was a finite amount of grains of sand on the beach, and I demonstrated the logic behind that is the impossibility to the contrary to which you were even saying like the possibility, and then you caught yourself and you didn't use that word because you knew that you're just basically you're backing up exactly what I'm saying.
No,
that it's the impossibility to the contrary.
No,
Okay,
I specifically used the words improbable and probable. So when we talk about probabilities, it is independent of impossible. Because if something is impossible, that means there is an absolute zero chance of something to be. You can create a system in which you can appeal to the most probable or most likely answer to a system, and you can determine it to be likely as fact versus independently or trying to objectively stating as an absolute or an impossibility that something does exist.
Yeah, okay, so I'll demonstrate it again, right? If motion is constant, right, that's an observable fact, right? Can motion be non-constant?
It depends on what you define.
It would be impossible. It would literally be impossible because reality wouldn't exist. Without motion, reality wouldn't exist. We wouldn't even be able to have this conversation.
Well, again,
in order for there to be humans, there has to be motion. You have to be, your heart has to be pumping.
When we talked about this before,
there's all these there's all these different forms of motion, right? So it's literally impossible to the contrary.
So
motion is constant. Ergo, it's governed by a constant principle.
It is impossible to the contrary. So when we talk about how the scientific method has proven that there are certain atoms that exist independent of changing state, independent of the motion itself, you would say that you disagree with the laws of science.
Do those atoms have electrons? Do those electrons spin, aka motion?
In this circumstance, no, because they don't decay.
The atoms don't decay, but the electrons still spin.
And if the electrons spin, that is a form of motion that exists independent in some circumstances of an atom that it is in contact.
So the electron is independent from the atom?
It can be.
Okay, it can be. Maybe. Depends. I don't know. Like, bro, come on. Like, we're talking philosophical here. You don't need to do the whole, like, I'm not going to give out to the Christians. I'm not Christian, bro.
I'm not talking about Christianity. What is your obsession with Christianity?
You have a hatred towards Christianity that you revealed in your opening statement. You do. Like okay, you're saying like the problem, Tareyak, is when you use words like divine, when you use words like pious, a supreme being, that makes me uncomfortable because then some of the things the Christians have been saying to me it actually checks. You know what I mean? And like this whole kind of like notion that you're saying that it's like there's no way to empirically test everything in the universe, which means you cannot make the claim that everything in the universe is in motion. The impossibility of the contrary proves that.
Well, okay, so again, we're gonna go ahead and move right past that because I have no idea what that has in reference to anything. But when we're talking about whether it doesn't matter. Your core argument is independent of the thing that you just said last. So what I'm going to say is that you can have an atom that exists independently of an electron that was potentially or originally tied to it, because when we talk about how specifically atoms move and the ions that are associated with those atoms, you can have atoms, and we have seen atoms within our observable universe that do not decay, which means that they are independent of motion.
Can an atom exist?
Your theory.
Can an atom exist without electrons?
It might be possible. Yeah, it can. It's possible. It might not be probable, but it is possible.
Oh my god. Okay, what element would that be? An atom with 0 electrons.
So it would just be a bare nucleus. I see you're laughing because you can't keep up with the conversation.
And that wouldn't be in motion whatsoever.
For you. If it gets too scientific for you,
that would not be in motion. That would be.
Yeah, you can have. Well, there are certain nucleuses that wouldn't. Well, if you would allow me to explain, yes, there are certain. Okay, I'm just going to have to talk over you then. So anyways, what we're talking about here is we're talking about a bare nucleus or an atom that exists independent of motion because it does not properly decay or deteriorate. We have in science observable instances of this which go against your idea or your theory of how motion exists, and just again uses your illogical idea of how these systems work to presume you are correct. Sorry, it's a logical fallacy. Sorry, my apologies.
You keep saying illogical.
Your logical
you keep saying illogical, but it's actually logical. And then like even the critique that you said, where it's the god of the gaps, like that's not the argument I'm making, bro.
It is. Actually.
You need to
because you're
find
not aware of it doesn't mean that it's not the argument that you're making.
Because it's the impossibility to the contrary. I'm not making any logical leaps.
Well, that's just an infinite regression.
What are you doing? Munchausen trilemma now? It is a brute fact.
All right, so we are at about time. Did we want to get another 15 minutes, or are we satisfied with where that landed?
I'm Gucci either way, baby.
Myta?
Yeah, I'm satisfied with that.
Okay, so Myta satisfied. You're good, Tareyak. So we go to closings?
Yep.
All right, so go ahead and start us off, Tareyak.
Yeah, so what we heard was like a bunch of agreements, and then you're just using fallacious thinking, but to not actually explain the leap that I've made is like that's the fallacy. If we want to start calling out fallacies, that's the fallacy where you just say, that's a fallacy, I don't have to deal with it. That's the fallacy. The more you know. So again, like my argumentation is quite sound. It's change is constant. To even deny that is retarded. You know what I mean? Because to even deny that presupposes motion, presupposes change. You know what I mean? So once we have that, the only way to describe that is to have an unchanging principle, an unchanging law, a divine law, a supreme being to describe that phenomenon. It's very simple. It's philosophy. It's like you guys, like I said, like you guys are literally handing all the W's over to the Christians, to Andrew Wilson, to Jay Dyer and all this kind of shit because at this point you are denying science. It's retarded. But appreciate you having me on, Kai, and Myta. Appreciate you being the opponent. Like I said, atheism dead, boys. Rejoice, rejoice. Atheism is dead. With that, I see the rest of my time.
All right, Myta, your closing statement.
Yeah. So, as you've seen from my opponent who attempted to shift away from the arguments I was making and revert back into a religious concept that even he doesn't adhere to or believe in to any extent, and avoid all of the questioning that I was giving, as well as adhering to logical fallacies and misinformation, is something that is very common, and the reason that atheism is actually on the rise. The problem is that there are people that use the sort of, I guess, what you would call illogical systems and conflate the ideas of science and philosophy within their own confirmation bias to hand wave away any problems that exist within their ideology. And rather than trying to move forward and creating a new understanding of how these systems work, rely on the more primitive understandings of how they work to try to justify the things that they believe because they're scared of having their worldview shattered. And as a result of that, I believe that humanity is likely going to have a regression as to how far forward we're going with scientific and philosophical thought as we continue to adhere to the systems and principles that exist rather than trying to challenge them in the notions that they provide and just assuming the correctness of them as objective truth without providing some level of objectivity. It always relies on a relative system that is always created that cannot prove itself beyond reasonable doubt and relies on the principles that it adhered to begin with to be able to consider itself just or objective without actually giving any reasoning to such. And I concede the rest of my time.
All right. So with that, checking if the chat has any questions. I'm not going to ask that question. So on my end, to Tareyak, in the demonstration of the idea that things are unchanging, what does it signify that causes these things to be unchanging?
Yeah, that change itself is unchanging, and you need to be able to explain that. And this is where we get like the justification for the law of gravity, for example. This is an unchanging principle that describes a changing phenomenon in the known universe. You know what I mean? Like I pick up this thing, drop it. That describes that's the law of gravity. That explains that. You know what I mean? So in terms of the like justification, it's like the mere fact that everything in the physical changes. We're all becoming. That's why they refer to it as a supreme being. I mean, another way to think about it is like the whole simulation theory. Very popular apparently in modern day, like where basically even a simulation, think of it like computer simulation that has to have a power source. The impossibility to the contrary. So, you know, to me, I think that's pretty straightforward, but sometimes the simple things aren't, you know.
Myta, any response to that?
Yeah, I would just say that the idea of change is unchanging, and specifically how that works is, well, I didn't feel like I needed to point this out because the problem is the ideology that I adhere to is also paradoxical. But I would say that there are simple or fundamental rules that exist independent of those. And as those paradoxes arrive, we will always lack the ability to test the upper limits of how those things fundamentally work. But I would say that we shouldn't settle for paradoxical ideology and logical fallacy.
All right. So to you, Myta, does the existence of unchanging principles point to anything specific that causes these unchanged principles?
Depends on the principle itself, because you could have a principle that exists within the let's say you have a scientific field and a principle is consistently unchanging over time. This could point to a pattern in which you would use the scientific method to determine whether or not something is I guess what you would call a truth or an objectivity. However, if you had something like a moral principle that was unchanging over time, you could have a system in which challenges that under a different moral framework, and you could determine whether or not that thing is consistent or not within all of the sort of philosophical justifications in the multiple different fields that they have. A great example of this would be something like you have certain like epistemological, ontological, and deontological fields of philosophy. I'm going to make an adherence to the ontological and deontological side with someone like Immanuel Kant with the categorical imperative. He used this notion to challenge the idea that morals came from God rather than a system in which could be used to decide how society ought to treat each other to create a system that is more pragmatic.
All right. Tareyak?
Yeah, so in terms of like the moral argument, like it's very easy to dismiss the whole moral relativist. It's like just get all these abortion advocates to refer to it as killing children. But of course they won't, because they know that doesn't work, because humans, the morality is an actual like objective phenomenon. Hence we have demoralization. Why demoralization is bad. You lose the will to live. And in terms of like the unchanging principle, like that's the foundations of science. That like that mere observation that everything in the physical is in motion. The only way to explain that is an unchanging principle. And the same way we're standing on the beach and says there must be a finite amount of grain of sand on this beach because the impossibility of the contrary is the same principle that we're applying in terms of the motion argument.
All right. So we don't seem to have any questions coming from the chat. So I guess you down to stay for a short open?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
All
of
right.
course.
So if anybody would like to join in on the conversation, has any questions or anything they would like to direct at the two debaters, by all means, jump into a room and I will drag you in.
Gonna take a piss real quick as well.
Yeah, by all means. Abortion is not okay. Well, I mean, that's a matter of opinion. So how did you feel about that, Myta?
Oh, I felt pretty good. I actually felt great. I think that when your closing statement has a cope like you're handing all these W's over to Andrew Wilson and the ladder of the crucible people he described, it kind of just says like, yeah, you should debate those people on this instead of me. And I'm more than happy to. I've spoke with Andrew Wilson once in the past, back in Archer's channel, and I've spoken with people like Rob Knorr a handful of times, and I would say my debates with them went relatively well as well. So
I would like to see how they would handle that situation. Let me add a Discord link. Here you go. There's a refreshed link. If anybody's not already in the Discord, there is your chance. Okay, we got Ancom. We got Drildo Man. Welcome, welcome. Oh, let me give Drildo,
oh my God, there are so many people come in.
Let me get Drildo some rolls because he is brand new.
And Razor's there too.
I will drag him as well. Okay, you should be able to speak now.
Hello.
Welcome, welcome. Any thoughts?
I have thoughts, but only when Tareyak comes back.
I would assume that
Same
means
Z.
it's a criticism of Tareyak. Does anybody here have a criticism of the things I said to get that out of the way before Tareyak gets back?
Your words were too big; they were hard to follow.
I had a couple of issues with a couple of the ways you responded to him and a couple of the arguments you used, like when he asked you, whether the number of grains of sand on Earth was infinite, and said no because that's obvious. And then he was like, "Well, how do you know if you haven't counted them?" because because the Earth doesn't have infinite space, obviously. Like, that was such an easy response, and I was surprised you didn't give it.
Well, that's the easy
mathematical
response.
impossibility would have also been a good response, in my opinion.
But the problem is a mathematical impossibility requires the scientific method to be able to prove. And if I didn't use the scientific method, which he used in his hypothetical, that means that I would be begging the question. This is why I didn't answer in that way.
That's fair. Okay.
Well, that's
There
the
you
thing. Okay, I wasn't here for his open, so I don't understand how he connected the scientific method to a divine being. He kept using this idea of the fact of the concept of things, like there are things that exist that are unchanging. Like, are things. I'm only hearing myself.
But welcome back,
Anyways.
Tareyak.
Yeah.
The people
So,
have
yeah,
arrived.
Tareyak, you keep using an argument that things exist that are unchanging, like motion, and somehow that connects to a divine being. That doesn't connect for me. How does something being unchanging mean it's divine?
That's what divine means.
No, it isn't.
Yes, it is.
According to what definition? According to what definition?
A supreme being, by definition, is unchanging. When you're evoking
Okay, that's
divine,
a
you're saying it's
no.
godlike. Yeah.
That is a property of a hypothetical supreme being. But just because something shares a property with a supreme being,
No, that's
does
literally
not
what being
make it
means.
related to the supreme being. No,
Being means
you're
unchanging,
affirming the
bruh.
consequent. You're literally just defining it into existence.
Being does not what?
Being doesn't
Yeah,
mean
being
unchanging.
means
I'm a
unchanging.
being.
That's why they say God is unchanging. Yeah.
No, you are a being.
Being does not mean unchanging.
I'm a being.
No, I'm in constant flux.
My lamp on my desk is it is changing. I can change it right now. I can move it. It is still a being.
Not a being. What are you talking about?
Then what the fuck do you mean by being? I am a human.
Unchanging.
A being is something.
What are you if you're not a being?
A being. Hold on, Razor.
Sorry, my bad.
Tareyak, are you a being?
Something.
So, yeah, when we evoke
being
you,
is something that follows the verb to be. It is being. That is the
becoming
meaning of the word.
Becoming.
Being. Existing. To be is to exist. That's it. That is all the word means.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, look it up. Go to any
being.
dictionary.
When we're talking about a supreme being.
Be.
Yeah, when we're talking about a supreme being, we're talking about something that does not change.
Okay, but okay.
That's what I'm saying.
So to be does not mean to not change, and things that don't change are not necessarily part of this supreme being that you claim to exist. Things can be unchanging without being a supreme being. That is not like supreme means
supreme
above
being means
everything
unchanging,
else.
bro.
That is literally supreme means above everything else. It is the greatest thing that could possibly exist.
It is above reality. It governs the change across the cosmos.
But you have no evidence that such a being exists.
Yes, because change is constant. Change is unchanging.
Change can be constant, and that has no bearing on whether or not a supreme
change is unchanging.
Because
which means
the idea that something is unchanging does not mean that
supreme being.
That is one property that a supreme being could have. But just because something shares that property does not mean your supreme being exists.
So after Tareyak's
which means
response,
your supreme being.
I'll let Razor take a shot.
I'll go after Vigi because I need to collect my thoughts after hearing.
Sounds good.
That.
So go ahead, Tareyak.
Yeah, no, fundamentally, like I said, that's what supreme being means, bruh. And I'm not like pulling from Christianity. I'm literally pulling from the ancient Greeks.
I mean, the ancient Greeks didn't have a good idea of what the divine meant either.
Oh, so the ancient Greeks got it wrong as well. Where we get our words from. They got it wrong too. Everybody got it wrong until all these atheists showed up and acted retarded.
Words
saying, that's not what it means.
Different places.
Man means woman. Trans woman is a woman. All this bollocks.
From PIE, we've stolen them from various other languages that don't even share our language family. Like, we get words from a lot of different places. Meaning is not objective. It is absolutely subjective. 100% subjective.
Meaning is subjective. So when I say water, like
humans create all meaning.
When I say water, that could mean
intersubjectivity.
clay.
It's unlikely because intersubjectivity
it's unlikely.
says that we tend to share a meaning for that word, but it's still subjective because it still comes
and the only way for that meaning, if everyone's thing was mind dependent, all their meanings were mind dependent, then we would not even be able to have a conversation.
That's not true. Minds can share information. It's how language exists. It's
why
language
not unless it's objective meaning.
No, you don't need an objective meaning to share information. You just need shared descriptors.
No, you don't need it. Don't need it. I don't want it.
I mean, you're the one
claiming. That's all you're saying, bro.
You need it. Prove your claim. Demonstrate your claim. You're making the
because how would we be able to transfer information if the meaning wasn't objective?
Why does it need to be objective to be transferable? I can transfer.
Yes, because it points that it's independent of our minds.
I can transfer to you a completely meaningless series of sounds or symbols or whatever. It doesn't have to have any meaning whatsoever, and you can still.
It would not be information.
Yes, it would. 01101001001.
That has a meaning. That has a meaning in binary.
I mean,
and that is an objective.
That we as humans apply to it with our minds.
Do you know what the meaning of it is?
Yeah, so if it is subjective, then binary can mean one thing to me, and binary can mean another completely different thing to you. Like binary can mean water to me, and binary can mean computer code to you.
Have you ever heard of it?
Does that sound coherent?
Because yes, actually, because in computer science, binary doesn't mean
binary. Yeah, binary means water, bro. Yeah.
Don't understand what an encoding scheme is, do you? You don't understand anything about computer science, do you?
You don't understand the encoding procedure, do you?
This is the tactic.
You know the difference between
you're acting right now.
ASCII and
engage, motherfucker.
Yeah, engage. I am engaging. He's saying that yes, technically binary can mean water, and then a completely different meaning to someone else, and we can have a conversation about binary. That's what you guys are saying right now.
You're acting like a child with your responses, though. That's the
problem. Oh my god! Here we go. I'm the child with the guy with the fucking bunny ears or cat ears on. I'm the child.
Are they bunny ears or cat ears?
Yeah, exactly. Holy shit.
Vigi.
Whatever to.
You're up.
Okay, so we're gonna address one of the things that you just said. With the whole fucking. In order to be a being, you have to be unchanging. Hey, buddy, are you a being?
I'm a becoming. I'm in constant change. So when we evoke you, like this is what when Player talks about the soul, right? You are not just physical, you're also non-physical. Correct? Or do we disagree with that?
I mean, I'm not an atheist out of everybody here, so I mean, I'm going to agree that we have souls.
Alhamdulillah, habibi. One at a time, we'll slowly erode away these atheisms. Okay? Yeah, so like you believe in a supreme being.
So I do believe in supreme beings. I do believe in souls. But I'm not going to sit here and say some stupid shit like atheism is dead. We haven't proved God exists.
Wait a second. Do you think that Nietzsche was an atheist?
I don't know enough about Nietzsche to say whether or not he was an atheist.
Oh my god. Like the whole fucking like debate with all like atheism is dead to counter the whole kind of narrative like Nietzsche saying God is dead and we've killed him, all this kind of shit. You do realize in that passage like Nietzsche is like telling the reader that he seeks God, right?
That's possible.
Yeah, so like Nietzsche himself was not an atheist. Like you
do realize
both
that
the atheists and the Christians, because the Christians were slave mentality, but the atheists were literally just same slave mentality,
right? The primary form of atheism is agnosticism. You do realize that, right?
No, because atheism is a claim.
Okay, atheism is the claim that that we don't have any evidence that God exists. Agnosticism is basically the version of atheism that says that God could exist, but we don't have any verifiable proof that he does exist.
You see the way you had to use two different words to describe the two different phenomena? There's two different beliefs.
What?
Agnosticism is a branch of atheism.
Right. So it's a non-position. So to say that it's a branch of atheism is just what are we even doing here?
There's
Atheism
agnostic
is also a
atheism,
non-position if that's the
Oh
the
my god.
point you're taking.
Agnostic
Atheism
atheism.
is literally
Do you
just
know what?
is
Do you
just
know
a
what
rejection
Gnostic and
of a claim.
agnostic are? Or?
I don't know that we know that we don't know.
I don't know that you know much.
Like that's what agnostic atheism means.
Wild.
No, it means I don't know and I don't believe. That is what
Hey,
agnostic
thank you.
atheism means.
I would just like to also point out that throughout my entire debate, there was a conflation between the arguments of how science works and how philosophy works and how they attempt to answer the same question. So you're going to get a lot of that here.
Yeah, I imagine.
All right. So you good, Vigi?
To an extent.
For now.
All right. Razor? And directly after Drill Doman. And
I'll be back momentarily.
cool.
I don't think I have too many questions right now. I'm gonna let other people go until I have all my thoughts collected on all this. Cause I'm doing like multiple things at once here.
Cool. Welcome, Wrath
I'm
of
trying to take care of a
Reason.
couple of things while this.
Hello.
Any
Hello?
thoughts?
Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Sorry, I got an echo here.
Whoa.
Hold on.
I think you're good.
You guys do your thing. Hold on.
Cool.
Do you have any thoughts to yourself or?
Well, we can move on to Razor. I don't think Razor got any chance to speak much in here.
No, you know,
Razor
it's because
passed.
I've been like mainly like listening and trying and responding to whatever.
I'm back.
What is his name? Tareyak
Welcome
child.
back. So your question, Drill Doman.
Okay.
So, mind you, I'm not in the right state of mind. I've been drinking, but I'm having. Well, yeah, but I'm having trouble understanding your point as a whole. Like,
Okay.
what you talk about change a lot, and I mean a lot. What do you mean by change? Like what is it? Like, how you quantify change? Why not reduce it down to just energy as a state itself? Like, it's the most, my understanding, the most basic thing.
Energy.
Like, if you have a particle at a state of zero energy, it doesn't move. It just is.
How do you get a
According to my
particle to
understanding.
zero energy?
That's the fun
I don't know.
one.
I don't know. I'm not a
can't.
Scientologist.
So there, your whole question is proven wrong. You cannot get that to be zero energy.
No, my question was like
No,
what
I
exactly
heard your
does it mean
question.
by what?
Double check that question.
I heard your question.
Yeah, could you
I just
re-ask the
defiled it
question?
in 3
Because
seconds.
No, could you re-ask the question real quickly? Because I may have missed it.
It's about a particle reaching zero energy.
No, like
Yeah.
what is change? Like when you're talking about that, like why not reduce it further to just energy? Because you have to have energy for things to change.
Yes.
So like that
for
is the most
energy, there's always
basic,
something
fundamental, unchanging
Yes.
thing. You have like a system will
because
always have
change
energy,
is constant.
right?
Change is constant. It's unchanging.
But that statement does not insist upon itself.
That doesn't mean.
But if you have energy, the change is constant.
Right, but
yes.
It's worth noting that change is a very metaphysical concept that describes the physical. So to say that change is unchanging, can the metaphysical concept of change undergo change? It might be able to. We don't know.
No, change
That's
is
the thing about
unchanging.
metaphysics. We've just never observed that anything has stopped changing. We don't know that it's unchanging. We've just never observed it happening.
Because
How can you test? How can you test without motion?
That's a
You can't.
non-sequitur. I said.
No, it's an impossibility to the contrary.
No, I've said that we've never observed
Прости
change
меня,
stopping.
Господи, но не
We've never
знают,
observed change
что
stopping. It
делают.
could stop. We've just never seen it happen. We don't know that it can't.
How can you test
In
for
fact,
that?
At least one of the cosmological theories suggests that it will eventually happen. It's called the heat death of the universe.
Okay. So how can you test for that?
Big crunch, big bang, big crunch model, but
I mean,
but even in the Big Bang Theory, even in the Big Bang Theory, they will admit that there is still motion before the Big Bang.
No, who says that?
Okay, one sec.
I mean, given the Big Bang is said to have created not only space but time, and time is the measurement by which we measure change. If time did not exist before the Big Bang, then change could not have existed.
Yes, so pre-Big Bang was there expansion or inflation?
That's a illogical question.
That's like saying what's
it's an illogical question.
It's like saying what's north of the North Pole.
Okay.
It's
just a logical question. Don't worry. I'll use the same tricks now against you. Go ahead.
No, it quite literally is.
Questions. Go ahead. Go ahead. You just stepped in it. You just stepped in it.
You said what is before?
That doesn't make sense. What is north of the North Pole, Tareyak? Can you tell me that?
Yeah. So
it becomes south because it's ever
before the
rotating.
Big Bang, pre-Big Bang.
That's not what I asked. It's not what I asked. What is north
pre-Big
of the
Bang?
North Pole? Not what I asked. What is north of the North Pole?
South.
Pre-Big Bang.
Not what I asked.
Yeah, so pre-Big Bang was there expansion? Yes or no?
What is north of the North Pole?
Okay, that's an illogical question.
No, it's not.
What you're asking
because as soon as you go over the axis of 0, it becomes 1, which becomes south. You fucking idiot! That it becomes south.
No, you're asking. You're asking what happened before time.
How does axis ever have anything to do? What are you talking about?
You were asking what happened before time existed. It doesn't.
But they deny. One sec, Brad. They deny a creator of the universe. But there's before time.
Because if you say something about what happened before time, that doesn't connect because a before involves time. There's no time.
It involves an ever-changing motion. There is no ever not changing motion. Everything you're saying.
Wait, hold on, Raph. You can have an ever-changing motion under a cyclical system in which there is a before that is unmeasurable or unquantifiable based on the ability to understand what existed prior to that event.
What has to exist before those prior events?
Okay, and when I talk about
no, what has to exist before those prior events?
It literally, by that definition, would just be something.
No, it would be matter. And does matter have ever-changing motion?
Yeah,
on the frame of reference.
Yeah, it would depend. It would depend on the
inertial frame of reference. Then there is no motion based on.
Well, because
we need to concrete the abstract. Like I can't follow any of this. It's just a whole bunch of nothing.
Well, yeah, it's theoretical.
It's easy to understand.
That's philosophy.
It's easy to understand, but it's literally theoretical.
This is why Plato
it's not
said,
easy to
just
understand.
wipe them out. Just give
you
them
have the theoretical and the abstract, but you can still make
scientific
it understandable.
Method. That's what we believe in, is scientific method.
All right, like
what does the scientific method tell you about the existence
of a non-physical thing exists? Explain how a non-physical thing exists.
Demonstrate that a non-physical thing exists first.
You can't.
Motion.
You cannot.
No. You can't. No, you point to the empirical. You point to the physical to prove the non-physical. You point to motion. Motion is unchanging. Unchanging principle is what governs that.
That's where I fucked up. I said change that motion.
Motion is physical.
Yes.
Yeah.
Motion is change.
Motion.
No, but in my original question,
motion is physical. How does that demonstrate the non-physical?
Yeah, the fact that that there's nothing motionless.
That's conceptual. That's still physical.
Which means that motion. Which means motion is unchanging. Which means it's governed by an unchanging principle.
Change me.
Nope, because
that particular thing about when you're saying about
that principle is still physical.
Because otherwise, principles are physical now. Oh my god, the non-physical is physical.
In our brains.
It's okay. It just changes every 2 minutes. It's good.
Therefore, the principles in our brains.
Oh my god!
I can trip over my own feet every 30 seconds too. It's great.
Read some ancient Greek philosophy, boys. Holy shit!
I don't know how. I don't think the Greeks knew much about neurology.
All right, so neurology. Let's get into that one. How is that ever changing?
Well, neurology tells us that thoughts exist in our brains. Our brains are physical, therefore thoughts and the concepts we create around them are physical.
Okay,
It's also why the
tell me how it is not changing. Tell me how it can
neurology
ever
is
be not
also
changing.
why
Oh my
the
God.
concept of the soul is the most dead concept, by the way.
Okay. And tell me
Who's
how
so
it could not ever change. How could that be non-changing? How could it ever?
Could you ask that in a coherent way?
Yeah, it's just all illogical questions.
Coherent.
Hold on, I'll put this in words for you.
Could you answer that in a
Do you
coherent and
understand
adult
what I'm
way?
saying?
Could you not act like a child and answer that and ask that question again in a coherent way, please?
It is
Thank you.
crazy that everybody that exists in opposition to my viewpoint has strawmanned, gaslit, and then ad hommed everybody who backs my viewpoint whenever they get faced with a question they can't answer.
Well, no, you can't answer the
You
question.
literally
How
just
can
said your
anything
questions
be
are
ever
logical.
unchanging?
You just dismissed all the questions as they're illogical questions.
I didn't
never
dismiss
said that.
all questions. I'm saying the one question you asked about what is before time is illogical because there's no such thing as before time.
Before I said before the Big Bang. Don't straw man me. Don't straw man me, boo boo.
That wasn't a
Terry,
straw man.
Bang
That
is
was
the
a-
beginning of time. Is
He talked about time. I'm talking about Big Bang.
Yes, the Big Bang is the beginning of
Yeah,
time. Is it not?
he's talking. Yeah, he's talking about. He's like the whole like pre Big Bang.
You are
Yeah,
asking when you say
because you get into
Tareyak,
infinite regress.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Tareyak, when you ask what happened before the Big Bang
Yeah.
is the beginning of time. So you are asking what happened before the beginning of time. It's a senseless question.
Thank you.
Okay, so in terms of like pre-Big Bang expansion, before the hot Big Bang, the universe was undergoing exponential expansion driven by a high energy field.
It was in a hot dense
That
state.
is the Big Bang.
Yeah,
What
so
you're
do I.
talking
Yeah,
about is the
yeah,
Big Bang.
yeah. No, you can Google this if you want. I'm just reading from Google.
AI
So
overview?
before the hot Big Bang, the universe was
AI
undergoing
overview you're reading? Hold
exponential
on. Is it
expansion
the
driven
AI
by a
overview
high
you're reading?
energy field.
the AI
This space
overview?
was
No, what
rapidly
it's talking-
expanding with quantum effects, creating distinct regions where local Big
the
Bangs
AI
occurred.
overview is
So
incorrect
even
because
before the Big
describing is
Bang,
the Big
there was
Bang.
still
No,
motion.
I need.
You
so
can't get
hold
away
on,
from it.
No,
You
isn't
have
the
to
AI
have
overview you're
motion.
reading? Yes or
Bang.
no?
Oh my god.
Who's asking the question?
AI because I'm asking specifically. I want to know like what you were reading. Were you reading just the AI overview from Google?
Does it matter?
Google has an AI overview
does.
feature.
It doesn't.
Is that
It
what you were
really
reading?
does because was that exactly what you were reading?
How can just listen to this? How
It
can you
it
create
matters.
anything?
It matters, and I will explain.
No, just stop for
but
2
I
seconds.
need you to tell me what
How
it was.
can you create
Oh my
anything
God.
out of nothing without motion?
We're
How
nothing.
Can you
create
wrap that
anything
around
out
your
of
brain?
nothing? How can you create anything out of
What is
They
nothing?
can't. They
Period.
really can't.
Hold on. What is nothing?
How do you create
No, what is
anything
nothing? What is nothing?
out of nothing without
Your
motion?
question is
With or
incoherent.
without
What is
motion.
nothing?
Yeah, it's an illogical question, Roth. Yeah.
Now, I didn't say illogical. I said incoherent. What
But
is
no,
nothing?
like how does anything
Whatever you
become
choose,
anything
boo-boo.
without motion? How? It
If
can't.
you think,
So how does the Big Bang theory, the Big Bang, come into play
I
without
need you
motion?
to answer that question before we continue. What is nothing?
Nothing is nothing. Emptiness.
Which level
Nothing.
of nothing?
No motion.
There are 12 different levels of nothing,
What is nothing?
conceptually speaking. Which one are you talking about?
There's
No
12
motion.
levels.
No motion.
So you're
Is
talking about
nothingness.
absolute zero.
Absolute zero.
Okay, you just described it. It's no longer nothing.
But how is absolute zero
With the question you're
created?
asking?
You can't create absolute zero because there is always motion.
Absolute zero
The
isn't
moment
something
you
you would
describe the
create.
nothing, it becomes something. I can't have you asking that question you asked me.
It's like saying, how do you create
So
dark?
you're saying that nothing
remove
doesn't
light
exist.
when you
One sec. You're saying by definition, you're saying nothing doesn't exist. Ergo, there has to be something. Which means if there's something, if there's something, that means there's motion.
There always is motion.
Yes. Motion is constant. Change is unchanging. How do you explain that change is unchanging? You have an unchanging principle, a divine logos.
Exactly.
No, if that means it's all natural.
claiming
No,
This is
no,
going back
Tareyak.
to the claiming that an unchanging principle doesn't mean it's a supreme being. It doesn't mean it's divine in any sense.
Okay, so
What
prove
does
the
divine
opposite.
mean?
Well, you just asked me to prove a negative. He's making a positive claim. I'm rejecting that claim. It's impossible to prove a negative.
Okay, perfect. So
that's a basic
prove
logical
against the
premise.
positive then.
So you're saying disprove the negative. It is not on me. Or sorry, disprove the positive. It's not on me to prove it because he has provided zero evidence.
No, we have the evidence.
Negative.
Everything is ever changing.
I've given you empirical
Everything
evidence.
changes.
When?
No,
So
I'm
prove
not.
it
I'm not
doesn't.
disputing that within our sphere of observation, that everything appears to be under a constant of change. I'm claiming that that is only within our observation. We have no evidence outside of our observation.
No,
Because
the impossible to contrary.
What?
Impossibility to the contrary.
The impossibility to the contrary. So you're saying it is impossible for anything to not change?
Yes.
What?
No,
You
we're
are
saying it's
claiming
no. We're saying it's impossible for there to be change to change.
You're saying it is impossible for change
to change.
So if things stop changing, then that would be changing, yes?
Yes.
Okay. So under any inertial reference frame, the referent is unchanging. It is undergoing zero motion. So that is changing.
That's not changing.
I can't fucking follow along.
One sec. How do you empirically prove? Yeah, how do you empirically prove if change stopped?
Okay, so from an inertial reference frame.
Here we go, yeah. From an inertial reference. Motion. Inertia is motion, correct?
An inertial reference
inertia is a measurement of motion.
Do you know what an inertial reference frame is? This is basic Newtonian physics. Come on.
The simple answer is no, he doesn't.
Basic Newtonian physics. Basic Newtonian physics, and we don't even presuppose that, but we don't have logic. I mean, so how do you measure? How do you measure? Yeah, how do you measure changing? That means that change would stop, motion would stop. How do you measure it then?
All I have to do is change the reference frame that I am looking from. So the reference frame.
You're saying looking. That's an action. That presupposes motion.
I'm looking.
You cannot look.
That I'm looking at. Sure, I can.
You cannot look without motion. You cannot look without time.
I can look. I can look at a thing that is not moving. That thing is the thing I'm looking at is not currently moving.
What are the
does it have atoms? One sec. Does it have atoms?
Yes.
And do those atoms have electrons that spin?
Spin is not what you think of as spin. Spin is talking about an electro. Sorry.
See the way you're trying to reach for the scientific terms and all this kind of shit just to go around. It's like, yeah, technically it does have electrons. Those electrons do spin, which would mean that even that thing that would appear that it's not moving, it actually is moving.
Spin is not what you think it is. But it's not rotation of an electron. Electrons don't rotate.
What creates an electron?
It's more of a frequency thing, right?
Electrons just exist. Nothing needs to create them.
What creates an electron?
They just exist. Nothing needed to create them.
Oh, really? They just exist.
I mean, we observe they exist. Why did something have to create an electron?
Everything has to create something. You just can't snap something out of space.
A lot of the times,
spontaneously, there was just something.
What created the supreme being?
Wait, hold on.
It's called either friction.
Most scientists nowadays are
friction is the first one,
or go with the idea that the universe is and always has been, therefore eternal. Therefore, all the atoms they just been here. We have no actual. We have no. What's the word? We have no need to. Or not need. Fuck. What's the word I'm looking for? Fuck. I literally lost the word. It's not going for science.
Necessity.
There's no necessity for the universe to. There's no necessity, is what you're saying.
Yes. Thank you. There's no necessity for there to be some person who said, "I'm gonna do this and start Like, no.
Yeah, that doesn't defeat my
it's
position.
always been here.
That doesn't defeat my position.
You say that
Because
the
even if the
supreme
universe,
Position is that there is a
one
divine
sec. Even
saying
if
that
the
the
universe
supreme
was
being is
eternal, one
incarnate.
sec. Even if the universe was eternal, then you go into what's his face, Spinoza, and it's okay. God is the universe because it's eternal. Ergo, there's still motion.
That's just
Cannot
another
deny motion.
definition of God.
Or a supreme being. It's all natural. There's no need for a
Oh.
god.
See, this is what I was talking about earlier with conflating
Motion would
science and
still be
philosophy and
unchanging.
the application of such.
Yeah.
So is motion God?
Okay. If I grant that motion is unchanging, how does define
Is
mean?
my
Or
shit
how does
God?
define mean unchanging? Where's that definition?
Can motion
coming
be quantified here so I can understand?
from? Yes,
Like, other than just an
usually
abstract
by some
concept?
measurement of
Because at
distance
this-
over time.
Because at this
Speed,
point, hearing from him
time,
is that
take your pick.
everything he's like everything is God when he does that Spinoza's God thing. If I remember correctly, that's what Spinoza's God was supposed to be. That everything is God because universe is God. All right.
Can motion be
Yeah,
reduced
what
at
I'm
all
saying
in
is
this
I can
explanation?
grant that. I can grant that, and that still would not defeat my position.
So,
Yep.
so I'm God, you're God, Lethe is God. Well, that one actually makes a lot of sense.
Well,
But
he's God of this church anyway.
No,
People
he'd win.
Do you understand what granting the argument means?
yeah, I do.
It's a
It-
conditional, meaning that if even
conditional
if
for
this
the
was
topic
true,
thing,
even if this was true, my argument's still not defeated.
it that's like one
Your
of those,
argument is simply that an
lamp-
Change is unchanging,
principle
baby.
is divine, which is
Antare,
not an argument for
everything
God.
flows.
just a parrot. Just a
It's not an
parasite
argument for
holding
God of
the
any
idea
kind.
so you can
It's
pretend
just
your
saying
ideas
that
still hold.
okay, a concept exists. What of it? How does that prove
It's
a
a
God in any
divine
way,
concept.
shape, or form?
Means it does
It's
not
not.
change. It is a descriptor of
Okay, so
reality.
you're just
Or a
redefining divine
divine-
to me
again-
does not change. But okay, so then I'm a
The
divine.
divine means
atheist.
God. God means supreme being. Supreme
There's
being
a
means
reason why
unchanging.
There's a reason why I didn't decide to go to school for philosophy. It's because
I am unchanging, therefore I am
No, the
God. I am a
colleges.
divine
By the way, the
atheist.
colleges are dog shit for trying to learn philosophy. You're better off just like self-teaching yourself. Like just read some Plato, read some. Jason
Yes,
Register Johnny's probably a
better
modern
off.
day philosopher.
Just
One of the
read
rare
some
few, to
Plato.
be honest.
shining
So in
example
terms
of
of
that, my friend.
yeah.
A shining example.
Yeah, so in terms of like this whole thing, like a modern day like philosophy, all they really do is just like was it like
We're gonna loop this back
logic
into
and
the
all that kind of
transes
shit. All they
again.
focus on is the logic and like fancy maths and all this kind of shit. But like they're not actually going back to the ancient Greeks, which, like I said, if you go back to Heraclitus, he didn't have religion, and he's
Philosophy
making this
existed before
observation
the Greeks,
and pointing
right?
to it.
Fuck the Greeks. Philosophy
Yeah.
existed long before them.
Yeah, it goes back to the ancient Persia, like
Persia,
North India, all this kind of
China,
shit. Yeah,
etc. Yeah.
yeah. So
Learn
like,
philosophy.
what's the
But
critique here?
why do I give a shit about what the Greeks
What's
said when
the critique here?
when tons of people
What's
Yeah.
say
special
What's
about
the
the Greeks
critique
is that
here?
they have the most
The critique here
written
is
and
that
writing word.
you are trying to define God into existence using natural causes by saying the natural
pretty much.
causes are God.
Yes, morality is
but we've
objective because
debunked your
demoralization
natural
is
Basically
causes,
just
so
doing
prove the
theism
rest.
with
you
extra
point
steps.
to objective phenomena in the universe, and then you give a rationalization,
You're
reason
rationalizing
why that
we're
physical phenomenon exists.
describing. There's a difference.
Can I ask you? I'm asking this question legitimately, purely.
Oh, hey, Kung Fu
not meaning-
Joe.
I'm
What
not
do you got to
meaning
say
to
on
be
So
this?
the other
mean.
questions weren't
Joe.
legitimate. Okay.
Like I have a legitimate. I'm not trying to be mean when I ask this. I'm not trying to say you are anywhere on this thing. Do you understand what the Dunning-Kruger effect is, or no?
Yeah, I'm just not smart enough to know, bro.
Razor,
retarded.
I would argue
Yeah.
no one.
The only
here
thing
really
I know is
understands
that I
the
know nothing.
Dunning-Kruger effect because
Bit of
it doesn't
Socrates
say
for you.
what anyone actually thinks it does.
You know
I
nothing.
know what
then,
the
right?
actual reading is, but the colloquialism.
It's all just like it's
Yeah, the
slogans.
colloquialism is dog shit.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, colloquialism is dog shit. I know, but it's just like
It's the same thing.
Yeah,
like what
I
Nietzsche
understand
what
it,
Nietzsche
bringing it
pointed
up
to the
for
Christians when he was saying like it's a slave mentality. It's like you guys have the exact same slave mentality. You're just reading a bunch of words from a dude, not actually doing any critical thinking of your own.
You are
You can't even
also
justify.
on a
You can't even
slave
justify
mentality
critical
'cause
thought.
You're doing the same thing.
I'm not doing the same thing.
We're all yes. You're
I'm providing
just enslaving
justification.
yourselves to Heraclitus. And the
I'm providing
Greeks, like,
justification. I'm not having to go to like neuroscience and all this kind of shit. I'm pointing out a simple observation that we all make.
Said. You are still doing slavery.
No, because when you have two conflicting stories, this is why I brought up House MD earlier on. When everybody lies, how do you determine the truth? You have to
by investigation
critically think. You apply the laws of logic. There's a contradiction in this dude's story. There's a contradiction in this dude's story. But the third person doesn't have any contradictions. And they all have the same identity.
Any of the three, you can have no contradictions and still be lying.
But you're applying the... Oh my god.
He's not wrong.
This is the idea.
No, but it's like the same thing. It's like the same thing that we're like, oh, like yeah, but if you believe in Spinoza, that means your God doesn't exist. I'm like, that has nothing got to do with what I'm saying.
I didn't say anything about Spinoza.
I've never heard this Heraclitus person.
No, what I'm saying is this is the same things that Bunny Ears over here said the same thing, where it's like it's a non sequitur to what I'm actually saying.
Razor,
it does not refute my point.
Fragments of things Heraclitus wrote. We barely know anything about him.
Okay, it's also important to remember that the propositions of Heraclitus are paradoxical, in which he attempted to solve a paradoxical argument with a paradoxical argument.
Okay, which is?
Oh,
I already explained this during my
the
debate.
Universal flux thing. Okay.
Yeah, I explained this during our debate, Tareyak.
And then just calling it a paradox doesn't prove that it's a paradox.
No, it's not calling it a paradox. It is paradox.
Okay, yeah, you're just calling it a paradox.
A dog, and just because I called a dog a paradox doesn't mean it's a fucking paradox.
Okay, well, again, you're just proving you didn't pay attention.
No. Prove where the paradox is. Just don't say the fucking word. Prove where the paradox is.
All right. So again, I will. Like when we're talking about chaos theory and specifically instability of being able to measure certain things that exist outside of our technological or physical ability to measure, to propose that those things have some level of objectivity is in and of itself fallacious. Because the most common, and I said this in our debate, the most common or the most probable understanding or answer to this thing doesn't always mean, well, it is paradoxical because it claims to be objective. That's the problem.
Yeah, so what Heraclitus defined the logos as is the objective, universal, and divine law that structures, regulates, and holds the universe together, often interpreted as the rational principle behind all change in existence. Do you disagree with this?
Quick question.
Is that paradoxical?
Yes, it's paradoxical because he makes
How is it paradoxical?
Sure. So when we talk about the logos, it's specifically an appeal to authority under religion because the logos is a religious concept.
I never pointed to religion.
It is a theological concept which is based in religion.
It's a philosophical concept.
No, it is a theological concept.
Is mathematics religious?
No. But the logo.
Well, mathematics presupposes the objective, universal, and divine law that structures and regulates and holds the universe together.
Yeah, but the thing is, you're creating a non sequitur, and then you're simultaneously.
I'm not creating a non sequitur. You're the one that said it was paradoxical, and then said, "Oh no, but it's actually pulling from religion." And then I just proved that it's not pulling from religion.
No, you didn't. You just said that it didn't. It is a theological concept that comes from a religious set of thinking. It even has.
What religion am I invoking then? If it's a religious test, what religion am I invoking?
It would come from specifically either the idea or the principle of an overseeing god or gods that was based upon either the pantheon or the idea of the divine.
No, it's not based on the pantheon. I never evoked Zeus. I never evoked the Christian god.
Did you not hear the or?
Did you not hear the fact when I talked about the person that you were referencing, not you personally? This proves that you don't listen when I talk.
It does. If you're trying to strongman onto him that religion
that is exactly what you should have done the whole time.
No, but now you're trying to strongman into him that the religion is there. So when he's saying there is no religion there,
the religion is there.
Otherwise.
Because you didn't listen to the debate either. Because I tried to
He just said it. You said or, so prove the opposite side. There's two sides to this.
You're asking me to. He interrupted him. Let him.
You interrupted me before you even let me finish, and then asked me to.
Both you fucking idiots said or. I'm just saying it.
No, I got a better idea. How about you listen when I talk instead of like just speaking out?
Listen.
Full sentence out.
So and the word "or" was there, so you better clarify.
So in this specific
he wasn't
circumstance,
done with the full sentence. You cut him off at "or." You cut him.
Yeah, exactly. You don't listen, and then you project.
I waited for 2 sentences and then I cut it.
You didn't. You didn't. He didn't.
All right, so let's go ahead and
re-rack it.
All of my feels, bro.
Mida, go ahead and restate. Wrath, please allow Mida to restate.
Yeah. So basically, the idea is that there is a religious idea or principle that is being evoked when we talk about specifically Heraclitus with the logos. The logos is a theological concept that was derived from religion. The issue is, I'm not presupposing.
It's not derived from religion. It's derived from empirical. You're wrong.
It's derived from a theological concept. This is specifically stated. There was an appeal to God's or
no, because he made a whole point saying I said an or, but then he literally just restated what you just said.
I never got to finish my statement. Notice how you never let me finish my statement because you can't actually listen.
Yeah, so you're making a false.
Incapable of fundamentally understanding an argument, so you just cut people off before they finish.
Yeah, I'm not putting to religion.
So, go ahead and finish, Myta. Everybody,
I'm not going to. They're just going to speak up again, and then this claim that I'm stupid. That's all it is. It's just an infinite regression.
I will go ahead and
never said you were stupid.
Go ahead.
Yeah. All right. So again, the problem is when we're talking about the logos, it is invoking a theological concept that was based in religion of the writings that were originally done by this individual writer. The problem is it is conflating the ideas of science with philosophy and creating a system which is based on a false premise. This is why I stated during our debate, if we wanted to detach the idea of a theological or religious concept from a scientific concept, we can move forward. This was agreed upon, and then that same concept was invoked multiple times.
Theology is not philosophy.
I agree.
Yeah, and Heraclitus, where does Heraclitus evoke religion
in
his case? Where's that tying to religion?
It's a theological concept.
You're just making that claim.
No, I'm not.
Hold on. I'll try to explain.
No, I'm not. It's just a theological concept.
It is a theological concept. The logos, by definition,
it's not a theological concept.
It is literally a word that means the word, the reason, or the plan, which is a foundational theological concept, identifying Jesus Christ as divine, the eternal Word of God made of flesh, bridging God and creation. This is from his own work. You just didn't read it.
So what fragment is that?
Like, there's multiple places where this is. Like, this is a reference to, like, even in biblical
just
studies.
Because religions accept science does not make science religious. You thick, ignorant cunt.
Yes, I understand that. But when you invoke a religious concept such as the logos, this is trying to bridge the gap between scientific study and philosophical study, which is done in religion. Which is a
science comes from philosophy.
Yes, and science attempts to answer the questions differently than philosophy does, as I explained in our debate.
Yeah, but it's not religious.
It is religious. It is a theological concept that is based in religion.
Did you not
yes, religion has philosophy in it, but it does not make it a religious concept.
Certain brands of religion have philosophy in them, not all of them.
Let me try to bridge this gap.
Sorry, I got that backwards. Certain branches of philosophy have religion in them, but not all branches of philosophy rely on religion. And this is why even in our debate, I cited Immanuel Kant, which was a rejection of religious philosophy.
And it's not religious.
Okay, thank you. I agree.
Let me try.
Immanuel Kant's not religious.
I pointed to an empirical fact of the known universe.
No,
that everything is in motion.
Yeah, okay, and that has nothing to do with the logos and the invoking of it.
The objective, universal, and divine law, the structures, regulates, and holds the universe together. Changes unchanging.
Well, again, we already agreed that the divine law is something that exists independent of religion. We agreed upon this in our debate, but now you're referencing something that is
you're the one that's saying you're the one that's saying it is religious. Now you're contradicting yourself.
No, I'm
breaking the second law of logic
upon something, and then you are going back on that agreement to try to justify your point because you can't do it independent of something.
I'm not. I'm the one that's making the claim that this is not a religious justification.
And you're using the logos, which is a theological concept.
It's not a theological concept.
It is.
It's not.
It is.
How is it a theological concept?
I already read to you the idea of how the logos was created and the theological concept of it. You just rejected it. It doesn't matter if we go forward from...
No, you just said it is. It just is a theological concept.
I didn't say it is. I explained
you're trying to assert it as a proof fact.
And then you tried to strawman me once again, as you always do.
No, you're trying to assert an idea as a strong fact. An idea is not a strong fact.
Well, no, I'm telling you that the idea of the logos was created out of a theological concept and it was adopted by philosophers.
What was the theological concept?
I already explained this to you. Please just listen when I talk. That's all I ask.
What is the theological concept? Just answer the question. Just answer the question.
I already answered this multiple times.
He just,
you know what? I'm just not going to talk anymore if my opponent's not going to listen. Yeah, it's just you don't listen when I talk. That's the problem. I can explain this to you.
You're just stating that it is.
gone.
That's why it's a two-way conversation.
Literally, I would like to point out that Tareyak just shook his head the entire time Myta was talking and listened to none
Yeah,
of
you're
it.
shaking all the words.
Oh
He's
my
like, nope,
God!
hear
How
it.
dare I shake
Don't
my
wanna hear
head?
it.
How dare I prove that motion
Blasphemy.
is unchanging?
weren't
Oh my
listening.
God! Oh
Wait,
my
hold
God!
on,
How'd you know?
hold on.
How'd
We
you know if
have
it was
someone
listening or not?
Wait,
How'd you know? How'd you know if it was
wait.
listening or not?
Hold on. We have somebody here, Kung Fu Joe, who
Yeah.
I went toe to toe with on the
Okay.
topic of religion, who is very versed in the religious concepts of the orthodoxy. Can you tell me, Kung Fu Joe, is the logos a theological concept that is brought up throughout religion?
The first time I ever heard the word the logos was from Orthodox Christians. So I mean, there might be some truth there, but it also might be true that it is describing something that is like a brute fact of the universe.
So the logos
given
was
that
presupposed
Sean
in the
Alhamdulillah.
idea.
begins with
The logos
with
was used
logos as-
colloquially.
You just got wrecked, Myta.
Doesn't
You
make
just got wrecked.
doesn't mean you win.
You just
The
got
Your
wrecked.
own
bro.
buddy
was
just dropped
used-
the mic on yourself. So
He's not my
Thank
buddy.
you.
Wait, do you not know the history
No,
between me
You
and Kung
just
Fu
called
Joe?
him out.
Kung Fu
It's
Joe.
You
Tareyak.
just called him out. You
Joe's
could-
on your
yeah,
side.
tell him.
Joe is
Tell
or
him,
no?
son.
No,
Joe's on your
literally.
side.
Yeah, Joe's on
Joe's
your
on
side.
Tareyak. He's religious.
Yeah, I'm not.
But
You tell
What
him,
up,
Joe.
Tareyak? I've seen you around before. How's it going?
What's the crap, bro?
No, yeah, no, I'm friends with like Steelborn and Eli and those guys, and I'm in Jim Bob's, and so I've seen you around.
Nice.
Good work. But yeah, you know, you guys are picking on poor Tareyak here. Well, how about you go toe to toe with an actual Christian that identifies
point me to him.
as.
Point me to him.
I'm right here.
Go right ahead.
We've already debated,
Right
Joe.
here.
You want to do another debate?
What was your takeaway from that?
Joe, you constantly deny it.
What? Say what?
No. Hold on. Let's hear Joe out. What is it that you want to debate, Joe? I will debate you anytime, any place, your channel. It doesn't matter. I've told you this. We even touched. We literally shook hands on the end of our last debate, and we borderline touched tips. Like I have.
I
no
swear you were saying
no,
that.
hell no, bro. No, well, I've been hearing.
Hey,
and
don't knock it till you try, bro.
I've been hearing and I've been seeing like comments from you that somehow you got one over on me or something, and so I don't know. Is that how you feel, or?
Well, actually, I came to that conclusion after watching a lot of people in the communities that I associate with review the debate. There was Horseradish that reviewed the debate. There was another friend of mine, NOK, who reviewed the debate. And there were a couple of friends of mine who aren't particularly prominent in these spaces who reviewed the debate and came to the conclusion that they thought that I was more logical and more reasonable in my conclusions than you were about religion.
Well, my friends all agree with me on the opposite too. That's easy to do, right?
Well, that's fine. My friends tell me I'm right, ergo I'm right. That's what you just said, Mike.
Only friends, by the way.
Wait,
my friends all tell me.
do your friends not tell you when you're wrong?
Okay,
Because
hold
if they
on.
don't tell you when you're wrong, then
Let
they're
me
shitty
ask the
friends.
atheist here. I just want to ask the atheist here is
atheist, but yeah.
and send forth your champion, if you will.
That's me. Hi.
Yeah, hi.
We're
So
fucked.
so anyway, is science the most objective, like logical way to view reality?
It can be. I'm not always saying that it is, because science in many circumstances changes as the technological understanding and the limitations of our ability to observe it change. This was the crux of my argument.
Yeah, well, I'm going to need a yes or no on that.
I would say as of right now, yeah, probably.
I would say it's the
But
best
that's-
we have. It may not,
hold on, wait,
it may not
comes
be the
along.
best.
Hold on.
Until something
hold on,
better comes
hold on.
along to overtake what science is able to do. Currently, yes.
Better is
I don't
a
think that's
subjective,
controversial.
but better is a subjective like measure. I don't give a fuck about better from a guy with fucking cat ears.
Nyan, motherfucker, nyan.
Yeah, he hit you with the anime girl. Do the cat pause too when you do the neon. There you go. That's the one.
God. Okay, so anyway, you agree with that? You agree with that sentence, right? That science is the most logical like tool we have to view reality through.
Yeah, I
But
would agree
that-
with that.
Better comes along.
Okay,
yes.
but that sentence was not created by science.
Well, you could argue that, sure, but like, okay, I understand where you're coming from. The
I would argue that
philosophical
it was.
basis that was created led to the sciences and how philosophy influenced the sciences.
That's
But
right.
science and philosophy attempt to answer questions in different ways. This is the problem that I have with conflating science and philosophy. I think there are certain things that philosophy does a good job of answering that science cannot, such as things like moral judgment calls. Whereas science does a real good job of being able to explain things like what we consider relative objectivisms or relative truths right now that philosophy does not.
Yeah,
It's
but
the
you need
how
to have
versus the
one
why.
before you can get the other, right?
I mean, just because historically we needed one before we got to the other doesn't necessarily mean that we require it going forward.
Try to do it with, try to make science without logic, without metaphysical concepts.
Okay, so the problem is that logic and metaphysical concepts could be argued to be something that were discovered, not something that were created by the philosophical ranges. So when we talk about how those things were created and their implication, it doesn't necessarily mean that they were derived of philosophy. Philosophy just simply gave names to the concepts as they were implemented.
Philosophy. I didn't say philosophy. You need logic to create philosophy. That's true. But you needed logic first, and logic is metaphysical. And so you needed something metaphysical before you could create science.
Sure, but that doesn't necessarily point to like the idea or the concept of a philosophical truth that a science couldn't otherwise prove.
Well, you can't even get to science without philosophy.
You can. It's just that we happen to be in the situations that science led to philosophy.
No, you can't.
You can.
Absolutely.
You're saying you can get the science illogically.
No, I'm not saying you can get the science illogically. I'm saying that the concepts that were derived of philosophy were not something created by philosophy that led to
logic
science. I'm
is
saying
eternal
the scientific
and uncreated.
method. Oh my lord! Again, science is something.
Wait, what was that? What was that? Your what? What would you say? Oh, you're what?
I don't know because you keep cutting me off.
Oh, your lord. Oh, okay. I thought you were atheist. I thought you were atheist, though.
I mean,
I literally
So
said
then, what do you mean? What do you mean, your lord? What do you mean, oh, your lord?
You don't listen. You
What do
absolutely
you mean, oh,
do
your
not listen
lord?
to anything I say.
I thought you didn't believe in deities.
Or no? Like, don't pull
It
that
doesn't
shit.
have to be a deity.
It's fucking funny. Don't tell him not to pull that shit. It was fucking hilarious.
It was hilarious because it was stupid. People laugh at stupid shit.
You guys are stupid. You guys are a bunch of stupid people.
How stupid it is to try and play that. It's extremely. It's fitting that it's April 1st. Jesus fuck,
Yeah,
you're a fool.
comedy can only be intellectual, boys.
That's not true.
Oh, okay.
I've laughed at people falling off bridges.
Demonstrate comedy that doesn't require an intellect.
Yeah, you ever seen someone
That's
fall
Donald
off a bridge and then I laughed at that shit?
What?
Watch somebody fart and
Oh,
laugh at it.
Why do you hate your fathers?
I don't hate my father. I have a
Yeah,
great
you do.
relationship with my
that
father.
whole Donald Trump, like a leader comes in, and you're like, I hate that. He's a tyrant. All this kind
I
of
never
shit.
said anything
Christianity,
about Trump.
the father. Oh, I hate Christianity.
I was just
all this kind of
saying
shit. It's unbelievable.
I was just saying that he was a comedy that doesn't require
entity
intelligence.
to guidance because he was just
All right,
absent in
all right,
life,
hold
dude. This
on.
is so much projection.
Okay, hold on. I got some more fun questions for the atheist now.
I'm not an atheist. You know
You're
that,
not
Joe.
what do you?
I
what do you
am.
believe in, Myta?
I'm an agnostic theist.
Well, I don't know what that means.
Look it up.
He's just an atheist. He's a
fancy
confused atheist is all he is.
That's great.
Agnostic atheist, agnostic theist. What are we doing here? What
We're
the
using
fuck are we
words.
doing?
Hold on,
words,
hold on.
Terry.
I
I
want to be sure. Hold on. I want to be sure that
Your
you.
personal
I want to be sure that you.
incredulity
I'm a pansexual.
I want to.
I'm
be
not a
sure-
pansexual.
Wait, let Razor in, please.
I just want to be sure that you are understanding when we use the words agnostic, gnostic, theist, or atheist. Theism and atheism is a belief system. Gnosticism and agnosticism is a knowledge system. There is differences there. There can be some overlaps, but when we say agnostic atheist, it means we don't believe and we also don't know. If we say
That's
we are
your feelings,
Gnostic,
bruh.
let me finish.
Prove it.
Let me finish. When you say you are a Gnostic atheist, you're saying I don't believe and I know there's no God. When you're a Gnostic theist, you're saying, I believe and I know there's a God. When you're an agnostic theist, you're saying, I believe there's a God, I just don't know who it is.
Real quick, can you have knowledge without a belief?
You have knowledge without a belief.
Depends how you
Define knowledge. What is the definition of knowledge?
That's why I paused. I was like, that.
You
that
can
question
see the
feels
smoke coming out of those little.
Yeah, that question's illogical. Let me guess. That question's
not illogical. It's more. It's not. It's not even incoherent. It's more. It's super loaded. I need to know what you mean when you say knowledge.
I just asked you to define knowledge.
What?
And then you just said, I need you to define knowledge, Tareyak. What is going on?
Wasn't it?
Where did we go? This is unbelievable. You need to bring some of these fuckers. Kai, you need to bring some of these fuckers to VK. This is hilarious.
Hold on.
It's hilarious. The atheists are so smart until
can
you
you
ask
have
what knowledge means.
Yeah.
Hold on. Was that you or Joe that asked that question about knowledge and belief?
Tareyak asked both questions.
Yeah.
Okay. Chris.
First he asked, "Can you have knowledge without belief?" And then he asked, "Can you define knowledge?"
I feel like that would be my question to ask. Like, can you define knowledge? I want to know what you're thinking.
Yeah, you can't answer. You don't even know what knowledge is.
No, because
this is what I'm saying. Ignorance. This is what atheism gets you. Atheism literally gets you ignorance.
So as soon as he tries, Tareyak, as soon as he tries to define knowledge, he's done.
Yeah, they can't even define knowledge.
Did I say I was a philosophy bro like you?
You have to be a philosophy bro to know what fucking knowledge is? That's pretty common sense.
Define knowledge. What are you, some sort of philosophy, bro? What is going on here?
Wizard, Harry.
I broke his brain by asking what is knowledge. This is crazy.
What's up? What's up, Ancom? Hold up, Joe. What's up, Ancom?
So after Tareyak asked Razor the question of can you have knowledge without belief, my immediate response to that was depends on what you mean by knowledge. So the person who asked the question of how you define knowledge was me, and I was asking that of Tareyak. Therefore, if I'm getting the order of operations right here, Tareyak needs to define belief, needs to define
that's
knowledge.
okay. That's okay. Yeah, that's okay. I'll give you the information. I will give you the knowledge. Knowledge is justified through belief. Ergo, you cannot have knowledge without a belief. So this whole thing that you're trying to do with the agnostic, atheist, and all this kind of shit, it's like you're basically like because you like to say that you have knowledge is to say that you have a belief.
Okay, so
it's so funny.
It's incoherent.
So
you don't even understand simple definitions.
Right?
Yeah,
simple definitions.
Because
one can still be,
and they're calling us stupid.
Was like a way
this is
of
unbelievable.
kind of begging the question.
Hold on.
Almost like
did you hear?
he
Hold
was
on.
giving
Did
you guys the answer.
Did you hear
No,
what
you
I
don't
said
know
when
what
I was
begging the
explaining the
question is.
difference between Gnosticism, agnosticism, theism, and atheism? Did you not hear what I said? I said there can be some overlap. I never said they're completely separate.
It is,
like I
it
said,
is a
those are your
two-dimensional
fields, bro.
spectrum.
Prove them to me.
There's overlap, but it's very. There's
It's-
also enough differences to why you need the labels
Razor?
of Gnostic versus agnostic.
No, you don't.
Razor, it's easiest to understand this as a two-dimensional spectrum. You have agnostic and Gnostic, meaning I claim knowledge. I do not claim knowledge or I claim knowledge. And you have theist or atheist, meaning I do accept the claims of God or gods, or I do not accept the claim of God or gods. That is what those words mean.
Yeah, he's the one that brought up knowledge and belief, and that was the distinction he was drawing. But I need to go down and get a bit of water. But I will leave you with a quote from Heraclitus, my boy Heraclitus, which is every man and woman in Ephesus should be hung and the city should be left to the children.
All right,
Plato was right. You need to execute all fucking atheists, man. I'll be right back.
20 more minutes, and then we're going to go ahead and end this.
Actually, not what he was saying. He was talking about Ephesus, which just had different gods than Athens.
True.
Okay, so to the atheists in the room, I know that's maybe not Myta then. What is the difference between, like, is your beef with religion, specifically Christianity, that it's silly to have a faith-based belief?
Can I actually answer this, even though it's not directed at me?
Go ahead. Well, sorry, who was it directed at?
Anybody
it was directed at the atheist, but Myta doesn't identify as an atheist. So.
Oh, okay.
Well, I'm not
So
an
do you-
atheist. It's not that I don't
the
identify as
Right.
rejection-
one.
So it wasn't
like-
meant for you.
Yeah.
Atheism is
Yeah.
just a rejection of claims about
Yeah.
a god or gods existing. That's it.
Yeah. So which one are you?
At this point, I would call myself an atheist because I don't
Okay, so then the-
accept any specific claims about any specific gods because none of them have been convincingly demonstrated.
Okay, so would you say that
I would
since
say
it
I'm
is
an
a faith,
anti-theist, but that's
since it, yeah, well, you're fucking easy. So since that's a faith-based belief,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
Because you're like, oh, there's no evidence for me to believe in it. Therefore, faith-based beliefs are silly, right?
No, I
Oh.
didn't say that. I just said I personally don't accept any of the claims.
Well, the existence of God and the claims are faith-based. So you're looking for
Yes.
hard evidence, right? So you're looking for hard evidence of something that requires faith, right?
No, I said I'm looking for convincing evidence. It's not the same thing as hard evidence. You just have to convince me. Now, my
Sure,
standard
convincing.
for convincing evidence might be particularly high because, I'm looking for, generally I'm looking for naturalistic explanations, but if you can convince me with a non-naturalistic explanation, feel free.
Well, I'm saying it's not naturalistic, it's supernatural, right? So in order to believe in the supernatural, you need to have faith, right?
Yeah, I suppose
know-
I suppose since
Yeah.
unless hold on, unless there is a way to derive natural evidence from the supernatural, then you must.
Let's say there
accept-
isn't.
Okay, then yeah, you would have to believe something
takes
that has no evidence indicating
It's
you to
supernatural,
believe in it.
right? Supernatural means it's above natural, which means that it cannot be proven through natural
Supernatural is a
methods
great
like
show.
science.
Outside natural, but like according to all the supernatural claims I've heard, there is at least some interaction between the natural and the supernatural and the natural, e.g., God doing miracles on Earth, right? So there would have to. So the fact that there are natural claims being made within supernatural belief systems mean that such claims should have some level of natural evidence to them because the supernatural interacted with the natural. No?
No, I disagree. If you want to believe
you
God,
disagree. Hold on. You disagree
I'm trying to tell
that
you
a
why.
miracle. Well, no, I just want to clarify. You disagree that a miracle done by a supernatural being within the natural world would not be a natural occurrence that would be explained with
Supernatural.
natural evidence? Yeah, but it's,
No,
it's the supernatural interacting with the natural, isn't it?
Well, no, yeah, it is. But the effects
okay.
are, the effects are still supernatural interacting
But they're not.
with the natural.
Yeah,
you need to have
but
faith
there
in
are
the
effects on the natural.
supernatural.
But there are effects
need
on the
that-
natural. So why don't we have
That's true.
evidence of those effects on the natural?
What would that be? So I'll give you an example. So like Jesus raising a child back from the dead, what would the evidence that he did that be?
I mean, it would be a fairly large battery of, did we know that the child was dead beforehand? Were we certain of this? Like, did we have as much natural evidence of the child being dead as possible? And then
I would say
Jesus did something.
What was the term?
Directly,
What was the term
to
for?
that? Hold on.
Let me finish.
Sorry.
So then, do we have observations of Jesus taking some action of that interacted with the natural that brought the child back? Then that would be evidence. Whether or not that's convincing evidence is, it would be situational. But I can imagine natural evidence indicating an interaction between the natural and the supernatural.
Ancom, I don't mean to cut you off, but I'm just going for yes, no as a line of questioning. You don't have to over-explain to me because.
But you can't do just yes, no questions on complex issues like
it's
this.
not that
So
complex.
It
kind of
really is, because you're
It's
talking
not.
about stuff that we've never
It
observed before. So then I have to go through the entire logical
But you're missing.
series
I have
to.
to cut. I'm sorry. I have to cut in because you're missing something here. You're missing context, right? So this happened
You
in
gave
ancient
context.
times. No. I'm giving you the context. Context that you're missing so that you can engage with it, right? So
Okay.
this was done in ancient times, right? Jesus raised the kid from the dead back in ancient times, and this was around the time where death was much more prevalent in the everyday life of the everyday citizen, that they were just kind of more familiar with it, but they didn't have the modern day medical technology to confirm death the way that we do today. So if
Okay,
that
so
happened,
they didn't have.
if that,
You know what else was very
information
prevalent
to
because of
determine the
it?
first part of it.
hold on, let me land the plane. So if that happened in the ancient times, what would the proof be?
I would say that given they didn't have enough knowledge about the biological functions that are required for life to continue, that I don't think there could be such evidence 2,000 years later where we know much more about the biological sciences.
Okay, so what would if he did that 2,000 years ago, could you disprove it?
No, could you prove it?
No. So, but which one of us?
You're making the positive claim that it happened. Therefore, according to the logical rules of how evidence works, the burden to provide the evidence is
no.
on you.
I'm saying that it's perfectly logical.
Stop interrupting.
That's not my claim.
If
That's
you
not my
cannot
claim.
provide. Okay, go ahead. What's your claim?
My claim is it's perfectly logical to accept that it could have happened.
I don't know about that.
No,
because we've
that
never had
absolutely
any
wouldn't
other.
be.
Well,
we've never had any other example of it happening. Well, we've never had any other example of it happening other than that written by people who didn't understand biological sciences 2 millennia ago.
Well, they know that they never saw it happen before, and that's what made them
and we've
believers
never seen
in
it happen
Christ.
since. So there's one claim.
I know there's not been
Now,
another Jesus. That's the point to me. That's right.
There's never been another Jesus. I mean, there have been other claims of similar things from other people not named Jesus.
What was his name? Satya
been,
Sai Baba?
All right. So,
I mean,
basically,
there have been lots of
Anton,
claims of people being raised
here's
from
the
the
thing.
dead. All the ones that we have ever been able to check to any extent
So,
have
Anton,
proven insufficient.
Wait a second.
This gets back to my point, right? This gets back to my point.
Wait a second, Joe.
That we need.
Joe, 1 second. Vigi, what were you saying?
Okay, so here's the thing. So like we have evidence of like in medieval times, them burying people alive because they thought they were dead. Like it is very logical to assume that what actually happened here was the kid was buried or like assumed dead, like in a lot of these situations, and then just woke up, which is exactly what happens. Which is why like we have found a lot of medieval fucking tombs where they had the like fucking string shit set up and a bell on it, so that way if somebody fucking woke up, they could ring the bell and just be like, "Oh, I'm fucking alive." That way somebody could come fucking dig them out. Like this is something that happened a lot back then because we didn't have the technology to determine if somebody is dead.
This has nothing to do with the point I'm making. The point I was making is that for you to believe that Jesus rose the kid from the dead 2,000 years ago, you would need to have faith in that story being true.
Yeah, and why would you have faith?
Yeah, but it's faith logical.
For your faith?
Well, hold on. So yeah, that's all I'm getting at. You would need to have faith to believe in that being true, and it's not the only reason. Because of revelation.
But what is faith?
I mean, Paul.
Joe, what is faith?
Paul commands you to give a reason for your faith. So, what is the reason for your faith?
Revelation.
What
Divine revelation.
Your faith is because your faith because of your faith. That's what.
No, hold on.
No.
Let him define it. What does divine revelation mean to you?
It means that everything that Jesus said would come true so far has. And he before that he fulfilled 300 prophecies from the Old Testament, which even though it's a religious book you don't believe in, the fact that he did that is highly unlikely mathematically. That's 300 for 300. So that
Okay,
would be
so
my
hold on,
additional reason.
hold on.
But
No,
it
I
is
can't.
still
No,
at
hold
the end
on.
of the day.
Don't let
Hold
me-
on. I wasn't done
Nope,
yet. I
zero.
wasn't done yet.
Okay.
I'm going to finish.
Zero, by the way.
So what I'm saying is that you would still need faith in order to be a Christian, and so we all agree on that, right? It's a faith-based belief. Now, my next question is,
all religions are faith-based.
what is and so is yours. What is
Not really.
No, okay, well here we go. What's the difference
There's
between
no
faith
religion with us, by
and
the
an
way.
axiom? Did you hear my question?
An axiom.
What is the
axiom
difference
has
between
evidence.
faith and an axiom?
An axiom has evidence.
No, it doesn't.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't.
Give me an axiom that doesn't have evidence.
None of them have evidence.
Give me one
They're
axiom
taken to be true.
that doesn't. They're taken to be true because they are observed. The observation is the evidence.
Your observation is
audience,
subjective.
Give me
For the audience,
one
a statement
axiom.
or proposition which is regarded as being established, accepted, or self-evidently true.
Self-evident, as in it has evidence supporting itself.
You don't have self-evidence of your own consciousness.
Yes, I do. I'm experiencing it right
No, you
now.
don't.
If I don't, if
No,
I
you're
don't have
asleep.
evidence,
I
hold on,
think,
This is a
therefore,
fucking
I
dream,
am.
Anton.
I
Anton,
think,
this
therefore,
is a
I
fucking
am.
dream.
Lethe,
I
This is
think,
a dream,
therefore, I
Anton.
am.
let me get in here.
Wait, stop.
If
Go ahead,
I
Anton.
do not have consciousness, if I do
I'm
not
good.
have consciousness, who should I say is asking the question of whether or not I have consciousness?
No, it's me. I'm your
I
own
am
stupid
observing.
brain calling you stupid.
That very
Why
well
would
may
he-
be true,
why would he
but
do
you
that?
are
Why
an
would he
I
external
am
voice.
me.
I
I'm
also
your.
have an internal voice that I'm experiencing. It is the
This is always where it goes. Solipsism. Hard solipsism. That's where they always go when
the
they have
evidence
nothing.
is my own experience. It's literally
Yeah.
I am experiencing my own
This is
consciousness
what
right now as we speak.
What you're hearing from me is what you think of yourself.
Hard solipsism.
That may also be true, but the thing
What
is,
I'm hearing from you
the
is hard
consciousness
solipsism.
that I am experiencing is evident. Now, you may
can't
be
prove it.
a separate part of that consciousness. I don't have to. It's my own
You
consciousness.
can't prove it.
Tareyak, is this why you're
I
not
don't have
religious?
to. My own
Subjective. Completely
What?
subjective.
Is this why you're not religious?
Yes, everything is subjective. I don't.
Yeah, all you
believe
need
in
is Heraclitus, baby.
Everything is subjective. Yes. Yeah, right.
Yes, everything
so you
is
can't
subjective.
say. So you have a faith-based belief. Your very own worldview requires faith. Thank you.
My very own worldview requires my sensory input, but you're right in that I don't know for certain that everything around me exists the way I perceive it. I act as though it does because that seems the most rational thing to do. It seems to provide the best
faith.
outcome.
Yeah, I agree.
I disagree that I have faith. I'm curious.
Yes, you do.
Besides Joe, based on my statements here, I would like everyone to sound off. Do you believe that I have faith based on my statement?
Not
Lethe?
really.
No.
No.
Lethe.
By necessity.
Razor.
No, it'd be blind in that
No,
case.
yeah, not really. No.
Razor. Tareyak.
Yeah, I said not really. No.
Sorry, there's a delay.
No.
Do you believe that I have faith based on what I've said?
They can't justify that answer.
I don't. I am looking for their opinions based on what I've said.
Of course they're going to agree with you, Ancom. That's not a fucking test.
He's
asking Tareyak.
I'm asking Tareyak.
on your
I'm asking
side.
everyone.
Yeah.
Okay, Tareyak.
So
Tareyak,
what's the question
based
again?
on what I've said. Do you believe that I have faith in my own senses based on what I've said?
Do I believe
Which is
you
to say
have faith in your
unjustified
own
belief.
senses?
Is he utilizing faith to say that he has senses?
He obviously does.
Yeah.
Okay. Drill down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
You obviously have faith in.
Would
I'm
I say that you have faith?
Based on faith of my experiences based on my senses. That my experiences are real.
He has faith that his a priori senses are telling him reality.
Wait, those are two completely different things you just asked. Ancom asked me anything, and then you asked me the exact opposite.
Yeah, I know. I'm fixing it for him.
How do you fix someone's question when you? God damn it.
Because your question was incomplete in accordance with my critique.
I would say that if I answer Kung Fu Joe's question, then Ancom would have what we call like theological or biblical faith, and if I answer Ancom's question, it would be what we call rational faith.
Cool. Vigilante?
I don't think that faith is a logical concept, so I would say technically yes, because when we're going based off our own experiences, we're not. It's based off of our own observations, which cannot be verified by other people, so they're not truly logical.
Yep.
All right.
Based belief all around.
Based on the majority of people who are all different aspects of my own psyche, I'm going to say I have faith. Sure.
Okay. There you go.
This is
so
why
having faith is not so silly because everyone does it.
Yeah.
Well, it depends on the reasons for the faith.
There's
my faith is based on my own senses, and yours are based on your own senses interpretations of stories from 2,000 years ago. I would say I have less faith than you.
Well, no, logic itself.
I feel like if we're going to stick with that of that everyone has faith of everything in general, the one who wins out is the one who has the most compelling evidence of the world around them.
Oh, well, I'm glad
the one who
we
wins
got
out
there.
is whoever has the biggest stick.
Got there. Because we got
majority of time atheists have.
So whatever beliefs require the least faith to hold would be the best ones to have. Go with that.
Okay, so here's where our two belief system gets us, right? Now, you guys, well, I know for sure, Ancom, you're a naturalist, right?
Yeah, for some definition of naturalist, sure.
Yeah, you don't believe in woo-woo supernatural stuff, right?
Not generally, until I see convincing evidence of it. Yeah, we'll go with that. I would say I'm an evidentialist or an empiricist, something along those lines.
Okay, great. So do you agree that, nature, everything happening in nature is just states of affairs unfolding in space-time?
Everything that happens in nature is just states of affairs.
Yeah, like the blade of grass growing, growing a blade of grass, or like a waterfall, a tornado, lion eating a zebra's head.
Yeah, I mean, these all sound to me like states of affairs unfolding within space-time. Sure.
Great. Okay, so are propositions coming from the human brain also states of affairs?
Sure.
Okay, so if those are just states of affairs, is debating things like naturalism and religion or whatever in your worldview is that a contradiction, like a performative contradiction?
No, I don't think so. Why would it be?
No, because, well, if evolution and naturalism led me to believe in God and it led you to not believe in God, why wouldn't debating be a contradiction in your worldview?
Yo, Lethe, Dragon Tie.
I don't see a connection between these two.
Well, I'm about to end
no, you don't think, now. You don't think, oh, wait, you don't think evolution led me to believe in God?
No.
I think it probably, I think
plain
that some
lands, I'm rating out.
Hold on. Hold on. I think that some aspects of evolution, in addition to all of the interactions you have had with other people over the course of your life,
interactions are just
natural events, but they're not just
social things.
Yes, but they're not. Evolution is not everything. That's the thing. Is like there are.
I know that
there are natural things that exist outside evolution. So it's not just evolution that led you to believe this. It's evolution plus a whole other host of states of affairs. But yes, I will give.
That's
you
what I said. States of affairs. Okay. Yes, I said it's. I agree with you. It's in your worldview. You believe in evolution plus states of affairs. Those are the only realities in the world, right? So. You're saying states of affairs.
Not that exact wording, because that's
I would say those are the only things that we can be certain of. Sure.
How do you account? Okay, how do you account for my belief in God within naturalism?
Because
Indoctrination.
You're less evolved.
humans seek stories. No, hold on. Let me answer this. Let me actually answer this.
Yeah, nice.
Humans seek stories for things that they observe that they cannot immediately discern the cause of. One of the types of stories that have been created for this purpose is the existence of supernatural entities used as explanatory power. That's generally why religions seem to have happened, anthropologically speaking.
Yeah, but I
Yep.
know your
I know
worldview.
blue,
Why
but
don't
obviously man
why
in sky
don't I-
magic.
why don't I
That's what-
accept your worldview even though I know it inside and out over mine?
Indoctrination.
That's entirely your choice.
Choice? I have choice?
Yes.
Yeah.
What determines choice?
Your brain.
My brain's just a state of affairs. It's just unfolding in space-time. There's no choice on my behalf.
Which means that a state of affair went one way when it could have gone another. That's choice.
Did I have a choice? Did I have a choice?
Yes.
I mean, it depends how you define the concept of you, but like, if we're
that's
talking
another.
about
Okay.
your brain had a way it could have gone and another way it could have gone, and it went one
What
way
about
instead
the
of
mind?
the other. That's a choice.
What's the mind?
The
Does
mind
the
is
mind
the brain.
exist?
The
The
mind
mind
is
is
the
not the brain. The mind is not the brain.
The mind is the
The mind is
process
not the
of
brain.
the brain.
It is.
No, I've
According to what?
talked to.
You're just making now. You're just making assertions without any reason.
The mind is not the same thing as the brain.
No, the brain is the physical mass. The mind is the processes that occur within that physical mass. Better?
What is that? No, the brain. What is identical? There's nothing called mind inside of the brain. You don't cut open the brain and you see the word mind or mind. What is mind?
Cut it open,
the mind
interrupt the
is
processes that are
working.
occurring.
Thank you.
The mind
it's
is
the
the mind
entire
is the
process.
sum of all of the different interactions occurring with the brain within the brain. All of the electrochemical signals coming and going.
There's
So
a reason
do you have
why
a sense of?
Go ahead. Sorry.
Do you have a self, Ancom?
Do I have a sense of self? Yes.
Do you have a self?
I think
How?
Right?
How do you have a sense of self?
I am.
Because
What is
that's
the
part
self?
of the. It's the thing which is doing the thinking.
Your brain.
Which is still.
Yes.
No, you said it's your brain, so it can't be the self and your brain at the same time.
I said it's the thing that's doing the thinking.
Your brain?
My brain is doing the thinking. The process of thinking is the mind. The mind is the self. So there.
So the brain is three things.
No, the brain is one thing. It's doing something else, and that's leading to the experience of the self.
How would you delineate between reality and dreams then? If the mind is just, or reality is just like your subconscious experience or your mind or whatever, how do you delineate between dreams and reality?
Whichever's more consistent. My reality seems far more consistent than any of the other dreams that I could be said to be having.
What if you were
whatever's more consistent?
What if you lived in a dream and then one day you woke up, you wouldn't know which one's more consistent?
So I'm going to go ahead and end here, but there was actually something that happened pretty recently. A woman or a girl that was in a coma, dreamt an entire life and a baby, woke up, realized she didn't have her baby or any of these things, and was severely distraught over it. So this is something that has happened. But Tareyak, I want to thank you for coming through tonight with a great showing. As always, you are
thank you, sir.
A formidable opponent. Myta, thank you for being a good sport and coming through here to debate Tareyak. You're both very much appreciated.
Yep.
And on that,
appreciate you, Allison, bro.
And we gave you a shout out in the channel,
nice
so hopefully some people
Tareyak.
popped over. And we're gonna go ahead and raid out into. I mean, are you gonna keep? Are you gonna keep streaming Tareyak? I'll just raid into you.
Yeah, I'm gonna do a cope stream thing, so open panel, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'll just raid over there.
Thank you very kindly, sir.
All right, y'all. Have a good night.
Absolutely. And raid is going out now. Thank you, everyone. Hope you enjoyed yourself. We will be back again next week, if not this weekend. So catch you then. And as always, chat is the true winner. Peace.
Take it easy, boys.